Well, hello everybody, and welcome to our workshop, the two things you need to know to run a highly successful repair shop. Had some technical issues this afternoon with some new equipment, but we've got it all fixed by going back to the old stuff. Anyway, we have on board with us, we have some people from Gemcar, which I'm going to introduce in just a minute, but just to let you know, for those of you that are new to this process, you do not need a microphone. Dean and Cochran there, I got a text from you, a chat from you, I should say, and you don't need a microphone unless you want to use questions or verbally ask questions at the end. Just so you know, you all have the opportunity to go into the chat portion down there. You can see the chat portion, and you can chat with just me individually if you want to say something to just me, and the moderator is going to actually see that as well. He's on board. His name's Kevin. And so at the end, if you have any questions, we're going to ask you to put chats in there. Anyway, welcome to you. If I could get you, please, just to try out that chat little box there, and if you could just indicate what city and state or province you're from and what your current labor rate is, and if you perchance have a diagnostic rate, if you could indicate that as well. London, Ontario, one of my favorite cities. Love London, and London, England as well. A little bit bigger of a city, but I'd rather navigate around in London, Ontario. Now, because just for the Americans that are on board, we don't have the stringent antitrust laws like you have in the US, where you can't talk about labor rates at all. And of course, because we have people from all across Canada and the US, so labor rates is not an issue. And so we've got somebody that's from Montreal. He'll be chatting in just a minute. We've got an $89 an hour labor rate. So if you could just keep on doing that. We've got somebody from Saskatchewan at $90 an hour. Kind of, I don't know exactly where you're at in Saskatchewan. I see the town, I'm not familiar with it, but there's only 2 cities in all of Canada that I've ever taught that every single person's labor rate in the room was over $100 an hour. You would think those would be Toronto, huge city, Vancouver, huge city, and that's not the case. In those 2 cities, I've been training for 30 years this year, and I can tell you people in Toronto, most of them, not all, but most, are just under $100, 98, 97, 99. They're so afraid to get that $100 mark. It's no different in Vancouver. They are very similar, just under $100 an hour. But the 2 cities in all of Canada that I've trained in, that every single shop in the rooms whose labor rate is over $100 an hour would be Calgary, Alberta, and Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. So when I saw Saskatchewan there, I saw that, and I just thought I'd mention that. Okay, anybody else? We have people on from Morocco, so I'm not going to just say that it's Canada and the US anymore. We have people from Morocco. So welcome to the folks from Morocco. I suspect it's even warmer there than it is here. Heather says she can't hear the speaker. Is anybody else not hearing me? Just to continue on with the last question that I asked, Greenville, Texas, 8903. That's a shop that's definitely taking some training. We believe if you do have a labor rate that you quote that it's not an even amount. If your labor rate's $80 an hour, 2 hours, $160, 1 hour, 60, they know what the labor rate is just by doubling it. But when you make it $89.03 and it's 1.5 hours, they go, oh, forget it. So obviously you're a person who has taken training. St. Catharines, Ontario, oh my goodness. I think I need to get a drink, although I don't drink when I'm doing these, but $70 an hour. But at the same time, I'm happy to see that your diagnostic rate is at $95 an hour. Please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying everybody should be over $100 an hour. In most places you should be, but it's all relative to the area in the sense of how much you pay your technicians. I get into San Francisco, the labor rates are $135, $140, $150, $160 an hour. But technicians are earning $40 or $40+ an hour, and the rents there are absolutely astronomical. What is the same in every single city that I go to is the benchmarks. We want to see you at 70 to 75% gross profit, and I'm going to show you that information in just a little bit. And we have Cochrane, where I lived for 23 years, Cochrane, Alberta, Canada, and $120 an hour, and that's just outside of Calgary by about 20 miles or 30 kilometers. We've got somebody else in London, Ontario at 96. I think I mentioned that one. Yes, we have a black screen right now. I'll change that in just a minute. The microphone icon says connecting to audio. I did a sound test and the music played just fine, but I do not hear anyone speaking. So you're not hearing me, is that right?
I'm hearing you loud and clear, though, Kelly.
Okay, so okay, I'll just finish off with back to my question, $108.50 an hour. Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Matthew, and Matthew's with GemCar. GemCar is the sponsor of tonight's workshop. We'd run 2 of these sessions once back March 21st. I remember it well. It was my 55th birthday, and we ran it again on April 12th, and GemCar wanted me to be able to promote one to GemCar customers. So I think almost everybody on this call uses GemCar. So Matthew, I'll turn it over to you, sir. Okay, maybe Matthew is muted. We're trying something different here, just so you know. I'm going to go see, looking for Matthew on here.
Oh, I am right here. Beautiful.
Oh, hey, Matthew, good morning, sir.
Good morning. Here I am. So
would you
basically,
like your coffee?
I would love to have it. Just so you guys know, I just discovered on the top right icon, there's a little red phone, and it's got a little X on it. So whenever you want to speak, you have to unmute your phone, and that's a great feature. So anyway, besides that, I'm very pleased because tonight we have invited only GemCar customer from either Canada, US, and a couple of places around the world. And we have a few people from Morocco. And for me, it's a pleasure in a sense that at GemCar, we're trying to build the best software. We're trying to have the best coaches and trainer to help you out. And that's why we also have Kevin King online tonight that will be representing the GemCar on the training side. So for me, the success in the software, it's not just about the technology. It's about the implementation and how to use it to make money. And that's why we work tightly with Kelly Bennett, because again, in life, you can have the best tool. If you don't use it properly, you're not going to get the result you're wishing to have. And that's why for me with Kelly, I think it's a great adventure in the sense that as we've learned to work together, we're just elevating the industry and we're making sure that at the end of the day, is it a tool from the software? Is it a tip from Kelly? Is it a special training skill or little feature that actually Kevin teach? At the end, if you guys are getting result, we are super happy. And that's why tonight you've been invited to a free training. And Kelly, I'm just so pleased that we can work together. And Kevin, also by attending all these training and participating in terms of training and added some little tip on the training side, that's great value. So I hope you guys have a great evening. We'll have to go, but for me it's important to introduce you because to make the introduction, because you guys are spending quality time and you have great people around the table. So you guys enjoy. Have a great evening.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. A couple things I just wanted to say. Matthew, you said you're wanting to develop the best software in the industry. I've seen pretty much everything out there, and sir, you do have the best software in the industry, bar none. The other thing for those of you that are online from the US, there's a few of you, you will notice that Matthew did not use any S's, and that's because somebody years ago stole all of the S's from Quebec, and so they don't have them anymore. Anyway, thank you, Matthew. I'm turning it over to you, Kevin.
Hello, Kelly. Good evening. Hopefully there's several, I know for a fact there's several of the customers that I've been fortunate enough to work with and continue to enjoy as customers. My goal with what we're going to be accomplishing here is this is a launch to make sure that the tool, you're getting the best ideas and you're getting pushed around a little bit to challenge yourselves. All of you have heard me say we're going to help you increase your labor sales. Labor's got to be first. You're going to add the parts and go along. And Kelly's really going to take it to the next level to get you the ideas and really hopefully challenge you to say, well, geez, everything he's saying, how is that going to work? My goal with being here is making sure that what he's teaching you, I'm getting firsthand. So when you ask the questions, when we continue to do webinars with GemCar, new features we're launching tomorrow. If you haven't registered, you should have received an email on version 9.2. That's a new process for us. Matthew and I will be on 7 o'clock. You can go to our website on the online store and you could register. It's free. It's all the new features that we've put into your GemCar that are going to become available to you as early as tomorrow on the download. So we're going to go through each step, record the session so you could attend.
ask some questions at the end or get a recording of it where you could watch it on your own. That way, the product you'll learn is not getting old. It's not going to become a DOS-based program that you need to replace. We are constantly inventing and engineering GemCar to keep up with the times. And with Kelly's teaching, it just goes hand in hand with what our mission statement is to elevate the industry and make sure you guys have the best product on the market. So I'm really happy to be part of this, Kelly. Thank you so much for allowing me to sit in and help coordinate the different events. And so I'm one chat away. If somebody has a question, they can, I believe, just put in there that they want me to follow up or they need help. And so Kelly, thanks so much for letting me be part of your process. Kelly, are you with me?
I so love having a moderator on the line. Kevin's on all of the calls, so don't thank me for having you on. Thank you for being on, sir. Kevin is on almost every single webinar that I teach. Anyway, on the screen you have Bob O'Connor, and Bob O'Connor is my mentor. I teamed up with Bob back in the 90s. Just a little bit of my history very quickly. I started my business in Calgary in 1987. I wrote a workshop called Starting a Successful Business, and I traveled across Canada, eventually to 151 cities, teaching people how to start a business for a living. Most of the people on this call are self-employed, and I think back to those days where people would come to this workshop on how to start a business. Most of them had the idea of starting, or they were just starting, or had already started, and they wanted to get some information. And the enthusiasm in the room was amazing. They were excited, they're motivated, they're going to make a ton of money, they're going to work when they want. And I would ask people at the beginning, why are you here? Only 3% of Canadians at that time were self-employed. In the United States, it's almost 3%. I bet you in Morocco, it's 3%. And if you Google it, Google says that approximately 3% of the world's population is self-employed. So it doesn't seem to matter where you are. Only about 3% of the people are crazy enough to start a business. So I'd ask people, why are you here? Why do you want to start your own business when 97% of people won't do that? And people would say, oh, I want to be my own boss. I don't want anybody telling me what to do. Well, they obviously haven't worked with any customers yet. I want to go in when I want. I want to leave when I want. I want to take my vacations and holidays when I want, and I want to make a lot of money. And my response was, I think you're looking for a job with the federal government. You're in the wrong room. Now, of course, when you are self-employed, it's nice because you do only have to work half a day, and 12 hours a day is a half a day. And I've had some people say, 12 hours a day, what are you talking about? I'm there 16, 18. And I remember those days. But if you've been in business 10, 12, 15, 20 years, those days should be very few and far between. Anyway, in 1992, I was asked by the University College of the Fraser Valley in British Columbia if I could do what I did for the automotive industry. I'd written a workshop on business plan, financial management, how to get grants, subsidies, and financing from the government. That was popular. And so I went to the university and I trained a group of automotive shop owners, small little independent shops, on how to get grants, subsidies, and financing and some financial management stuff. And what happened was it was part of an 80-hour program where the federal government of Canada was paying 75% of the training for people to run their businesses better. For those of you that are on board from Canada, that funding is available still from the federal government, but it's for training employees, and you can just do the skills grant, just search it on Google and you'll see that it's run through the provinces. It's actually federal money that they put through, and just to let you know, it's specifically for training employees to improve the skills of our employees. And they will pay up to 75%, usually it's 66%, but up to 75% of training, up to $10,000 a year per person per company. So if you got 2 employees, you're entitled to $10,000 each, as long as the training is at least 24 hours long. So you can search that. Anyway, if you need more information, you can't find it, just email me, kelly@kellythecoach.com. Anyway, so back to the program. Bob O'Connor was an American. He came up from Seattle, and he was teaching some amazing stuff specifically for the automotive industry. And Bob was absolutely instrumental in bringing the training to independent repair shops that we desperately needed. His background was owning shops, but he also worked in the dealership environment. And in the dealership environment, he learned very clearly that the money is in selling the labor. And he realized that a lot of independent repair shops were actually excuse me, not tracking labor, and the average independent repair shop was only selling 4 or 5 hours a day. And so he brought to the industry a technician time management class, which I tell you I've taught more than anything else. Anyway, I traveled with Bob all across Canada and the US, and he taught me a huge amount, and I was very fortunate to travel with him actually on his 55th birthday. We went to Atlanta, and we were talking about implementation, and we were saying how that some people are brilliant at implementation. They go back after a class and they do really well. But I said, you know what I've seen is we do an 8-day class. It was not something Bob had put together. We did, but we did 2 days of training. We'd go back to the same city a month later with 2 days of training, and then 2 more days, and then 2 more days. And the topics were time management, service advisor skills, financial management, and employee management. And I said, here's what I see happening, Bob, is some people come to the class, they open up their binder, they take their notes, they take a bunch of notes, they write a whole bunch of stuff, they close that binder at the end of the 2 days, go back to the shop, put it on the shelf, and then think, oh yes, I got to go back to that class tomorrow. And it's a month later, but it seems like it went by quickly. And they take that binder off the shelf and they come back. And we talked about implementation, and the key we knew was management groups. And I took over Bob's Canadian management group, a 20 group that we had with shop owners from all across Canada in it. We actually had a couple Americans come as well. And the implementation was absolutely phenomenal. And so one of the 2 keys, one of the 2 things that I know that you need to do to be successful is to be in a management group of some kind. And that simply means that you're not trying to do this on your own. I personally think that running a business is too complicated to completely do it on your own and to get the input of other people, because you wear all the hats. If you're in a large corporation, a large parts company, for example, let's say Worldpac, they have a marketing department and a sales department. They have an accounting department broken into accounts payable people and accounts receivable. Some people, that's all they do all day long is pay bills, and other people, all they do long is collect money. And they have an HR department, and they've got an accounting department, and all these departments. But when you're self-employed, you have to wear all of those hats. You are the accounting department, you are the finance department, you are HR, you do the hiring, you do the firing. You have to write the ads, you have to do the marketing, you have to do the sales, and it's all very complicated. But when you're in a management group, it all comes together like that. So I just wanted to introduce Bob and let you know who he was. And again, he passed away, unfortunately, about 5 years ago. And I was extremely important to be able to go to visit him for the second last week of his life. I spent over a week in town with his wife and his 2 kids. And anyway, so Bob, by the way, handpicked me. He'd say he calls me the EnterTrainer, and that's why if you're in one of my classes, you'll see me telling lots of jokes, etc. Anyway, just recently in British Columbia, Canada, I was asked by a young fellow, well, not so young, he's in his 40s, I guess maybe that's young, to me it's young, and he was injured. He was a technician for quite some time, actually probably in his 50s, I guess, and he was injured at work. He'd been a tech for over 25 years, and he drastically injured his shoulder and was no longer able to be an automotive technician. And he'd read articles that I'd written in Canadian Technician, and he contacted me and said, Kelly, I can't be a tech anymore. I want to be a manager. Can you train me? And so Workers' Compensation paid me to train him, to retrain him from being a technician to being a manager. And so I put together a program. I spent 3 days in class with him. I gave him access to all 14 of, at the time, my 14 online webinars. And we also wanted to do 2 days of on-site training. So one of my clients had contacted a shop and said, how would you like Kelly, the coach, out there for the day, and a fellow that he's training? And they said, sure. So we went to the shop. I'd never been there before, but I was almost mortified. It was not a nice looking shop. The front entrance was nice. The bays were just okay. It was okay. I'm not going to say it wasn't nice. It was just okay. But I did have access to the financials. Their parts gross profit was 38%. That's horrific. Their parts gross profit on tires ranged between 11% and 18%. That's absolutely horrible. And their labor gross profit was less than 50%. They were only selling about 3 to 4 hours a day per technician. And I was almost embarrassed to be there and for this person that I was training to see that. So we spent about a half day there. That was enough. And I said, well, we're learning what not to do. And I knew some shop members in that area from the management group that I took over with Bob way back in 1996, and it was actually on my birthday, which is kind of interesting. I think my microphone just changed. Can you still hear me okay, Kevin?
Yes, Kelly, you're fine.
Okay, great. So something just happened with my mic and it switched to a different mic. Anyway, so I phoned some shops that I knew from my management group from back in 1995, 96 in those days. And I said, look, I've got a guy I'm training. He was a technician. He was injured. Some of them knew the shop that he was at. He was there at the same shop all those 25 plus years. And they said, yeah, we know that shop. And so why don't you come by? So I had arranged to go into each of those shops for about 20 minutes to a half hour. And they're all in the Vancouver, Canada area, so relatively easy to get to. And we went to one shop, and Kevin, you know me well enough to know I don't exaggerate. You're not going to hear me say everybody this and nobody that and always this and never that. Sounds like a politician. We're always and everybody and nobody, and it's not the way it works. But in this particular case, all of those guys were doing extremely well. Every one of them, and again, I don't exaggerate. And I know this guy, and I'm not, it sounds like I'm making this stuff up, but I'm going to prove the math to you in a little bit. Last July 2016, he had his best month ever. He was consistently doing $42,000, $45,000 a month in sales. One time he hit 50 per technician we're talking about. And last July he did 53,000. Now, I know from doing the math, and you'll see the math shortly, that it is possible, it's rare, and please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that Scott does $53,000 every month. He doesn't. And I'm suspecting that there was some work that was from the month before that was done the month before the last couple of days of the month, and it was paid at the beginning of the month, something like that. I mean, I know some of that had to happen, but I know for sure that he did at least $50,000 in real money that month. And he rewarded his employees by sending them all to SEMA. And if you've never been to SEMA, I think everybody should go to that at least once in Las Vegas. And he closed down his shop and sent all of his staff, which I thought was a commendable thing to do. Anyway, but he consistently does $45,000 to $50,000 a month, and he is in a management group way back then. He was in the management group that I ran. He's still in a management group today. When we were in his shop in a beautiful facility, just doing so many things right, the nice thing about Scott is he's a manager. He's not a tech. He's not an advisor. He has people that do those things. He's a manager, and he spends the bulk of the day in his office. And I'm sure many of you know the old concept of, are you working in your business or are you working on your business? And a lot of people just working in the business, they're spending the day fixing cars or talking to customers or whatever it might be, and they're not really managing the business. But he truly is a manager, and that concept comes from Michael Gerber. He wrote a book called The E-Myth, and I'm going to recommend it if you've not read it. It's called The E-Myth Revisited, the new one. And he says that we spend so much time working in the business that we don't have time to work on it, and Scott's a guy that works on it. And I'm looking at his whiteboard on the wall, and here's what it said: productivity percentage, efficiency percentage, and proficiency percentage for the day, the week, and month to date. And I thought, yeah, we taught that way back in the early 90s. I learned it from Bob O'Connor. We went to the next shop that doesn't do quite as good as him, but consistently $42,000 to $45,000 a month total sales per technician. Beautiful facility, just amazing. He also was in that management group back in the 90s, and he does really well. I'm looking at his board right there in his office. Productivity, proficiency, efficiency. Again, he tracks it. He tracks it each day, each week, and month to date. And then he's got it on paper, you know, of course, for year to date, which you're going to see shortly here. And then we went to another shop. And again, I don't make this stuff up. And a beautiful facility. They just moved into a brand new facility. They own the building and doing a lot of stuff right. Amazing numbers. And I look, and here's a board that says productivity, efficiency, proficiency. All that to say, we went to 5 shops that day. All of them were in the group from years ago. All of them are on their game. And all of them were tracking productivity, efficiency, proficiency. And I can tell you this, the number one thing that makes you money is selling labor. The parts are important, the sublet and the tires and the towing and the shop supplies and all of that is important. But when you sell the labor, everything else goes along with that. Recently, I was training in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and I'm starting to feel old because I've had many people who come up and say, you trained my dad back 20 years ago. One day I'm sure it's going to be my grandfather took your class. But this fellow I trained 20 years ago in November of 2016. I remember it like it was the day before. And he was sitting there Neat guy, but he unfortunately did not know the difference between markup and gross profit. He didn't understand labor inventory. He wasn't familiar with productivity and efficiency. And why would he? He was a technician, a brilliant technician. And I was just recently training at a shop, and he does amazing numbers. And I don't exaggerate. I say amazing, I mean amazing. And he has shop management software that tracks the technician's time, and he knows the productivity, productivity, efficiency, proficiency every single day. And here's what he said to me. His name's Rex. Rex said, Kelly, when I learned how to sell the labor, I learned how to fix my business. He said, when I learned to go from selling 5 hours a day per tech to 6 hours a day per tech to 7 hours a day to 8 hours a day, sometimes 9 hours a day, he said, when you sell the labor, everything else takes care of itself. Now, I wouldn't say it's quite that simple, but the concept is true. If you sell the labor, you sell everything to go along with it. When I'm training parts companies and they'll hire me to go in and talk to jobbers, I've done that many times, and I'll start the session by saying this. Your average customer, the bulk of your customers, in fact, are only buying half as many parts from you as they should. And it gets quiet. And I say, I'm not saying they're buying half from you and others from everybody else. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that that shop that you're dealing with is only buying half as many parts as they should on average from everybody. Because if you only sell half the labor, you're only selling half of the parts. And so I want to encourage you to track the labor inventory more than anything else. Yes, your labor rate's important, but there's so many other factors as well. One last thing in the introduction, I do like to start with the big picture first and then get into the fine details. But Kevin and I were training in Ottawa, Canada, which is, of course, the capital of Canada. And Kevin sat with me for the day, and he did some of the training. And let me tell you, Kevin's awesome. We talk like last night for hours and hours and hours, and we get bouncing ideas off each other. And actually, I'm writing a new article called Save a Deal or Save a Jobber. We had a great conversation about that. And by the way, I did send out the article that I just wrote on oil changes, and that is the average customer of yours, if they are commuting, the average in Canada is about 60 to 70 hours of commuting a year. And we're not talking commuting, sorry, I apologize. We're talking idle time. The engine's running and the car is not going anywhere, or it's going less than 25 kilometers an hour. And according to Ford, every hour of idle time is equal to 40 kilometers. In the US, it would be 25 miles. But in Canada, 40 kilometers for every idle. And experts all agree that idling on an engine is twice as bad on the engine parts as driving is. And so that means that most of your customers really do need one more oil change a year. And now I'm writing another article that I'll be sending out to all of you, and it's on mastering scheduling and how to truly, truly pre-book your schedule in advance. So anyway, Kevin and I are in this class, and I was talking about how there's only 3 ways to make more money. There's only 3. And by the way, just so you know, the PowerPoint presentation you're going to see tonight, and I'm not one of those people that will be on a webinar or in a classroom and read PowerPoint slides. I think we've all experienced that. You go and they read page after page after page of PowerPoint, and you think, I could read it myself. Could you please talk? And anyway, so we were in this session, and we're talking about the 3 ways to make more money. And you don't have to write this down. Again, I'm going to send you the PowerPoint. And you'll see why it's complicated in some of the things, so why I don't send them out in advance. But just to let you know, I'm going to be sending you all of the information I'm going to look at tonight, including the spreadsheets, with the exception of one, and that is the composite that we use internally for groups, and that really does belong to group members. So I'm not at liberty to send that out, but I do want to show you the concept of that. But there are only 3 ways. You want to make more money? There's only 3 things you can do. You can sell more, you can charge more, or you can reduce your expenses. That's all there is. Now, saying that, selling more, increasing sales can increase your sales, yes, but it can also not increase your gross profit. I know a fellow, and this is a true story, in Atlanta, Canada, who was doing pretty good in the tire industry. His son was working with him, did not want to continue working with his dad. He didn't want to be a mechanic, he said. He didn't want to be in the automotive industry. He didn't want his hands dirty all the time. And so he decided to go to university. And he went to university and he got a degree in marketing. And after he finished, he couldn't find a job, which is kind of interesting because if you go to learn marketing for 4 years, you would think you could sell yourself into a job because that's what marketing teaches, one of them, but he couldn't. So he went to work for his dad, and he ran the marketing department for this tire shop in Atlanta, Canada, in addition to doing some of the work at the shop, like tires. In the first year, Trey is his name, that he worked for his dad, their sales increased $287,000. That's not exaggerated. That's what he said, 287,000. And he was so proud of his son because his son was so good at selling tires and making things happen. And they went and they sat and talked to the accountant. And the accountant said, well, I've never seen this before. He said, I've been looking after your books for years and years and years, and I've never seen exponential increases like this. He said, I've seen, incremental where every year you're getting a little better, but my goodness, he said, that's almost a straight up curve. So what happened? He said, oh, my son came to work for me. He said, he's a smart kid. He's got a degree in marketing, and he said, we sold a lot of tires. And the accountant said, but you saw the problem as well, right? And he said, problem? What problem are you talking about? He said, well, your sales increased $287,000, but your net profit only went up $240. And that's the reality of sometimes in business today, where it's so much more expensive to run a shop. I'm going to date myself. I'll tell you, I was a service advisor in Calgary in 1978, 79, and 80, my first job after high school. And when I was working there, we didn't have a lot. Eventually we got the Sun machine. Remember the Sun machine? That was just awesome. Now I still see it in some shops because they can't get rid of it because how much they paid for it. It's really a boat anchor now. We didn't have computers. We didn't have expensive telephone equipment. We had dial phones. We didn't have computers to go online and connect with part vendors. We didn't have, it was all handwritten stuff, and if we wanted to get a hold of a customer, it was either call them at home or at work because you couldn't call them in their car. I mean, we didn't have cell phones, and answer machines were just starting. Most people didn't have them. And now today, a shop has all of these amazing tools like GemCard to walk out to a car with a handheld scanner and scan the VIN number, and it does this VIN decode. When I was running service, Kevin, we had a guy who was dyslexic, and he would go out and come in with the VIN number, and I'd say, no. Something's wrong. Is this an O or is this a 0? Is this a 1 or is this an I? And he would get it wrong. Now, today, you could just take a picture of it with your cell phone or scan it with your scanner, but in those days, we'd have to go out to the car and write it down. It was all one great big long number, as you know. Anyway, the point is, it's so much more expensive to run a shop today with computers and software and telephone equipment and all the cost of running a business today. And if you don't charge more and do it differently than you used to, then you work harder and actually make less money. And that's not the only shop with Trey's shop. I've seen shops where their sales are increasing, but their net profit is actually staying the same, coming up a little bit, or actually decreasing. And in the case of Trey, I tell you, if I owned that shop, I would rather not have seen the $287,000. I would prefer it didn't even come in, because there's an illusion of money. You look at it and think, wow, look at all this money, but it's going out the door super fast. And who made more money? The newspaper did, because they ran more ads. They ran more ads, bigger ads. They ran coupons. Who won? The customers won. They got tires cheaper than they did the year before. And they opened Saturday, and then they opened Sunday, and they extended hours, and they were just going like crazy, fixing cars and putting on tires and taking them off. Kind of like tire season right now. You can get really busy. By the way, I've tracked it with tire season. Some shops, it's the highest sales of the entire year. November's usually, I'm talking winter. It's a little delayed this year. But that month in tire season where it could be your highest sales of the entire year, and my records show that it's usually the second lowest gross profit of the entire period of time. So all of that to say, there are two real things that you really need to know to run a successful business. One is to be on your game, to know your numbers, to understand that increasing sales does not necessarily increase gross profit. The second, as I mentioned, is increasing gross profit, and tonight we're going to focus a lot on increasing gross profit. Just to let you know, this workshop goes about an hour and 45 minutes, and the last 15 minutes or so is open to questions. And if you want to stay on for questions, great. You can simply just type them into the chat. I will attempt to unmute all of the microphones, but we were on a meeting last night and we heard these two dogs having a fight in the background. And I won't mention who that was, but it was kind of funny. But that stuff happens. We can't control that. And so I will try to unmute. But if you do, if you're in a quieter environment and you send me a text and say, could you unmute me, I will do that. So we will do some question and answers in just a little bit. Anyway, I want to talk about increasing gross profit. And what gross profit is. Gross profit and markup are not the same thing, and I find a lot of people aren't familiar with the difference between markup and gross profit. And so just so you know, your screen went blank. I'm aware of that. And I want to show you, and as I mentioned, there's two things that really make a shop successful. One is being on your numbers, and I believe the other is working together with other shops. Management groups, I believe, are the key to implementation, because in a training session, you can go back to your shop and get caught up in stuff and forget that you were going to start using the parts matrix, and maybe you started pre-booking appointments, but you dropped that. And it's human nature. We'll start something and stop, and we'll start something else and stop, and sometimes we don't stick with something long enough to make it habit. And by the way, I've asked the question in classes, how long does it take to break an old habit and form a new one? And my favorite answer came from a lady named Maria in California, and her answer was too damn long. And I thought, oh my God, that's funny. But the answer is 21 days. If you decide tomorrow that you're going to start using a parts matrix, if you consistently do it every single day and don't think, oh, I can't do it with this customer, they're a good customer. I find it interesting, by the way, when people say, I'm a friend of yours, why do you want to charge me as much? Turn that around. I'm a friend of yours, why do you want to pay me less? Why would I pay my friend less money than a complete stranger? It makes absolutely no sense. Anyway, if you purpose to use the parts matrix that we're going to be sending you, and again, we're going to send you all the tools with the exception of that one composite you'll see at the end. If you purpose to do that every day for 21 business days, you will probably do it for the rest of your business career. If you decide tomorrow you're going to start to pre-book every single customer, you're just going to do it, and you consistently do it for approximately a month, 21 business days is a month, you will most likely do it for the rest of your life. Rex Sarzen, way back, like I mentioned, 20 years ago, where he learned to sell labor, he had his technicians on time clocks and time cards. Now the clocks and cards are gone. You'll shop in gem cars, you can track. And by the way, Kevin, my favorite thing about your software is the time clock, because I know that's where the money's made. The matrix is great, ordering parts is great, all of that stuff is awesome. The scanners, making your own barcodes, it's phenomenal. But the fact that we're tracking what's happening with the hours for the technician. I'll give you an example of that. Let's say in the morning, tomorrow morning, you had 8 spark plugs dropped off at your shop, and you counted them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that day 4 of those were installed in the customer's vehicle. And at the end of the day, the other 4 are gone, just missing. You have no idea where they went. You think, oh, well, they're gone, I guess. The next day, 8 o'clock in the morning, 8 tires are dropped off at your shop. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that day, 4 of them were installed in a customer's vehicle. But at the end of the day, the other 4 were gone, just missing. You never did find them. How long would it take the average owner to freak out to find out whether his plugs or tires are going? Day 1 or day 2? It would be day 1. And the reason I give that example is because tomorrow morning, each of your technicians is going to show up at your shop approximately 8 o'clock. And most of them will be there for 8 hours, excluding lunch. And most shops will sell 4 or 5 of those hours and not even wonder what happened to the other 3. The technicians were there. They were warm body in premise. They were at least there. 8 hours excluding lunch. You should be able to sell all 8. If it was spark plugs, we'd be freaking out. But if it's hours, sometimes we don't pay attention to that. So let's go into the financial part of this. And I said, understanding your numbers is absolutely key. And one thing that's really important to me is this is not designed, if you don't know the stuff, to make you feel stupid, because this is not what this is about. There's a huge difference between ignorance and stupidity. Ignorance is you simply don't know. Stupidity is somebody's told you 15 times, taken out crayons and drawn pictures, and you still can't figure it out. There are those kinds of people out there. They don't usually own their own business. But ignorance is different. If you gave me a set of financial statements, if this was a technician's class, and if I was a participant and you put a wiring diagram on the screen right now, I'd be looking at thinking, oh my God. I did a 2-day class recently in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I spent 1 full day teaching how to sell diagnostic time. It's a huge process, and there's a lot of money made if you sell it correctly. We can't get into all of the detail of that tonight, but selling diagnostics is key, and that's why I asked how many people have a diagnostic rate. The second day was how to do diagnosis, and I hired one of the absolute best technical trainers in this country, and he spent the day teaching how to diagnose vehicles. And I sat there because I was sponsoring the class. I was looking after the coffee and the meals and making sure the registrations were happening. And I'm sitting there looking at this trainer thinking, I haven't got a clue what you're talking about. Somebody asked him, fuel trim, what the heck is fuel trim? I have zero idea what fuel trim is, none. And I really don't care because I don't need to. And they're talking about fuel trim, fuel trim, fuel trim, and then they're going on and on and on. I think, oh my God. One guy asked him a question, and he comes with this answer that I understood maybe 5 out of 15 words and I looked at him, I said, that's exactly what I would have said. Now, just because I can't read wiring diagrams, you should see me the first time I was trying to put wiper blades on my car and crack my windshield. Anyway, sorry, that doesn't make, well, that's borderline stupidity, but the point is that if you don't know something, that doesn't make you stupid, because you have things that other people can't do. In fact, every single person on this call, whether you're listening to it right now or you're listening to it later on, the recorded version, everybody on here does something better than everybody else on here. You do something better than anybody else. It might be fixing cars, it might be diagnostics, it might be selling skills, it might be whatever. We all have our skills. And that's what I love personally about management groups, is to see all of these skills coming together. And Kevin, you've heard me say this. In a management group, I've seen that everybody is king or queen of something, everybody. You might have somebody with 3.6 hours per repair order. You go, wow, how do you do that? And they go, yeah, I do have 3.6, but you've got 51% gross profit on parts, and I've got whatever. How do you do that? And then you've got somebody who has over 1,000, I don't make this up either, pre-booked appointments for the entire year. Well, how do you do that? And then somebody else has the nicest facility you've ever seen. The point is, in a management group, I love it because you don't feel ignorant all the time. Everybody steps up to the plate. Here's how I do what I do. Not everybody does everything perfectly, but together we certainly do a lot of stuff right. I believe with financial management, it comes down to this GPS. And as I was mentioning, Kevin and I were teaching this class in Ottawa. It was called GPS, Set Your GPS for More Profit. And I was talking about how there's 3 ways to make more money. As I mentioned, increase sales, increase gross profit, reduce expenses. And I was talking about reducing expenses. And I almost want to say that it's almost impossible for a shop to survive or do better simply by reducing expenses. Now, I'd be a little bit incorrect if I said you couldn't, but I would say from my 30 years experience, it's almost impossible to do better simply by reducing expenses. You might do a little bit better, but it's not going to save the company. Now, there's an exception to that. I was training for a shop in the U.S., in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. The guy had an ego bigger than Chicago, and he rented, I should say, a massive facility that he planned to grow into. And I said, how much is your rent? We looked at his sales, and over 30%, again, I don't exaggerate, over 30% of his sales were going to pay rent. He was in a facility way beyond what he should have. And just for the record, 5% of your sales should go to rent or your mortgage. So no more than 5%, maybe 10 if you're in a really expensive neighborhood, but definitely not more than 10. But the benchmark is 5% of your sales. You know what it really is? If you're open 5 days a week, 1 day of sales should equal close to what your rent payment is. So if your rent is $2,000 a month, your daily sales should be about $2,000 a day, because 5% is pretty much 1 day, 20, 21 working days in a month. So that's kind of an easy way to gauge it. What's your rent payment or mortgage payment, and how much? And this is excluding, your gas and your electricity. We're just looking at rent. And if you are not seeing your sales in a day close to what your rent payment is, it could be your rent's too high, or your sales aren't high enough, or your gross profit's not high enough. But that's the exception to the rule. That fellow was in a facility beyond him. And I was saying to the class that I've seen some people who are really good at expense management. And I said some people are so cheap they can squeak. And I talked about, one shop I knew, he always turned off the lights in the bay at lunchtime. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it's not going to save his company. And then I talked about how that some people will take their fax paper back in the days of faxes, or people still do it with printers, and they'll have a printer that's specifically for shop use, and they'll put the paper that they had from before through it and print on the back. And that's not a bad thing. It's kind of good for the environment, and in the school of things, it doesn't make very big of a difference, but it helps a little. And I can tell you that what I have found when I've tried to do that is now I've got a piece of paper on my desk thinking, which side did I, and you're looking back and forth. So now you think, was this one? Or no, that's what I wanted. And one quick example of that's kind of funny, but I had a fellow who got his part invoice from his part vendor, and there was an invoice, and on the back of the invoice was the actual income statement for the previous month for the parts store. And he's looking at the parts and thinking, oh my God, look how poor his parts gross profit is. I assure you, Kevin, you know it well, that a repair shop can get much higher gross profit on parts than a parts store can. We can get 50% if we do it right. You're certainly not going to get 50%, at least on overall, in a parts store. Anyway, so he called his part vendor and said, well, things aren't going so well at the business over there, are they? He said, what are you talking about? He said, well, your gross profit's pretty bad. And he said, your rent is pretty expensive and your net doesn't look very good. He said, what are you talking about? He said, well, I got my invoice from you this morning, and on the back of it is your income statement. But he saved a little bit of money, of course, because he put the paper in backwards. And the point is, if you do that, you can, again, help the environment a little bit. But I've done the math. If you're really, really good and you're consistently putting paper in the printer or fax machine backwards, if you're good at it, I mean really good, diligent, daily, in a year, you could save $5. In a year, I should say, you could save $5, maybe even as high as 10 if you've got really good quality paper. The point is, there's 3 ways to make more money: increasing sales, increasing gross profit, reducing expenses. And I will safely say that it's almost impossible to do drastically better in your business or save a business that isn't doing well by reducing expenses, unless you're the example of you've got 30% of your sales going to rent. That's an exception. The highest thing, the most important thing I think you could do, unless you're already doing it, is increasing gross profit, because you can increase sales without increasing gross profit, without increasing your net profit. And I've actually seen some people where the sales went up, but their net profit actually went down. Let me give you another example of that. Kevin, you've heard me do this so many times, and it's not always the same because it just isn't. I've got 30 years of knowledge that I'm trying to give in an hour and a half to 2 hours. But there was a lady in Ontario, Canada, and I went out to her shop. She had hired me to go out and do an on-site evaluation, which I did. And I went out and she was showing me her financials, QuickBooks, which a lot of people use, and I've used it for years. It's awesome. I don't think it's a way to run a shop. And I see some people trying to run their shop with QuickBooks, and I don't think that's wise because it's not shop management. But she said, oh, Kelly, she said, if we could just redo 2008. 2008 was our best year ever. And I said, okay, well, Susan, what made it your best year? And it wasn't a stupid question, or, I wasn't trying to make fun of her. I was just asking her why she thought it was the best. And her answer was, it was our best year in sales. And I said, well, what about net? She said, well, I didn't really look at net. And so she was looking at her income statement, and I said, well, one of the things that I don't see here is your percentages. And for those of you that are online, I can tell you that the bulk of people that show me their income statement do not have percentage columns. Some do, of course, maybe half, I don't know, but a lot don't. And to me, knowing your numbers is far more about your percentages, your gross profit percentages, your labor percentages, your parts to labor ratio percentage, what your labor mix is. It's all about percentage. And that's why it doesn't matter if you're on this call from Atlanta, Canada, or down south US or San Francisco. The benchmarks, the percentages are all the same. We don't really focus on what a shop sales are. What we want to look at is what are your sales per technician, what's your labor to parts ratio, etc. Anyway, so back to Susan. So I showed her in QuickBooks because nobody'd shown her. She's a smart lady, but nobody'd shown her. So I went into preferences. And I said, here's how you can do it. Just click on percentage column. And all of a sudden, she looks at it again on the screen. We didn't reprint it. We just looked at it on the screen. It's all we needed to do. And the look on her face was incredible. She said, oh my God. She said in 2008, our net profit was less than 1%. Our benchmark is 20% net profit. Hers was less than 1. And she looked at me and she said, you know what? I think 2008 was one of the worst years we've ever had. If all you do is look at sales and don't focus on gross profit and net profit and the ratios, etc., I'm going to show you things that I believe that you need to know every single month. And I'm going to demonstrate it to you. It's called the Income Statement Analysis Tool. I'm going to show you that you should be able to complete that once a month for your shop in 5, maybe 10 minutes, depending on where you're getting the information from. Almost everybody in this call is a GemCar user, except maybe one, but almost everybody is. So the data we're talking about, you can get it from your GemCar quite easily. And by the way, I am going to be talking about Parts Matrix. It's nice to be able to do a session specifically for GemCar, and I've asked Kevin to show you where in GemCar you can do the extra little tricks that GemCar has done to help you increase your gross profit. Anyway, sorry, I just lost my train of thought there for a second. I was talking about Susan, increasing sales. But sorry, you know what? I need to go back. It's hard when you're staring at a wall rather than a group of people. It's a lot more stressful to teach into a microphone than in a group of people for sure. But back to Ottawa, and we were talking about increasing sales, increasing gross profit, and reducing expenses. And we had this fellow, he was convinced that the money was made in selling parts. And yeah, there's money in parts, but what I've learned about parts is when you sell parts, that's where you make money. It's not in the buying, it's in the selling. It doesn't matter for the most part, there's exceptions, but if you shop around and make a whole bunch of phone calls, or as the guy said, right, we were making fun of this last night, not making fun of him specifically, but the industry with computers, and this guy looked at me and said, Kelly, you don't understand, it's just click, click, click. And in reality, he was trying to make me look foolish in front of my people. And he goes, oh, Kelly, it's not as complicated as you think. It's just click, click, click. And I said, you know what? I know what you're talking about. You can click, click, click. But you still need to look at the parts costs from each of those vendors, what the gross profit's going to be. Maybe you're looking at list as well, and you need to mentally jig where you're going to buy that part from. And it's not just click, click, click. I said, I know what you mean, but that's slightly exaggerated when you say click, click, click. Anyway, they were talking about how they would go to one vendor, to another vendor, to another vendor, and Kevin, you were there. It was embarrassing. One guy said, look, and we were on the second floor of a parts store in their training room. We were their guests. We were on their turf. This was their place. And he says to the part vendor in the room, whose room it was, some of your stuff is too expensive. And I looked at him, I said, tell you what, sir, here's what I've learned. If your part vendor, this vendor, and all of your other vendors decrease their parts prices tomorrow, everything across the board, every line item, they reduced your cost by 10%, most people in this room would make less money. And if your vendors tomorrow increased, not after they've decreased, okay, but if they didn't go down 10, then up 10, but if every part vendor increased their prices across the board tomorrow by 10%, most of you would actually make less money. And I saw a picture last night when we were talking about this new article, and Kevin, you inspired me, Save a Dealer, Save a Jobber. And I saw this ad for a real repair shop that says, we shop our prices basically, and we pass along all of the discounts to you. So what that means is the part store made less, and you made less because the customer won. And I'm not saying that the customer should ever win, but most shops aren't charging what we need to anyway, so to pass along a discount. The point is, the better that you get at buying parts, and a little call here and another call there. And what I said to that guy is, I said, look, I understand what you're saying here is that some of their prices are higher than other people, but if this was a different part company, if this was Worldpac, if it was CarQuest, if it was Uniselect, if it was Auto Camping, if it was Napa, it doesn't matter. Anybody's training room, you could look at them and say, some of your stuff is too expensive. Part companies can't spend every day looking at every single other price and trying to match that. I had a fellow who was working with a part vendor in Ontario, Canada, who was tired of people saying, but you're too expensive here, and this is too expensive, and I looked at your price here, and it's more expensive. So what he did is he took 50 line items, and he compared his parts company's price on all 50 with, I think it was 3 or 4 other vendors in the area. And he was surprised a little bit. He thought, wow, we're higher there. Oh, they're higher there. Or we're higher. Oh, look at those guys are much. Oh, those guys are higher there. He said, but at the end of the spreadsheet, he said the difference was minuscule. And I'm not saying you can't phone around and go click, click, click and find better prices, but it's more work, and sometimes we sacrifice quality, service, and delivery to get a better price, mark it up the same way, and make less money. And it occurred to me on our awesome webinar last night with GemCar, I said, you know what? Giving your customer as a vendor, your parts store, giving a better price to a repair shop is like encouraging them to reduce the labor guide times. And we were talking about, quick labor guides and how you can go online and get the quick labor guide, but it's not the cheap labor guide. I mean, could you imagine if I came to you and said, look, we've got this labor guide that's really going to screw you. What we're going to do is we're going to take 0.5 off of every single job, and you are going to have the lowest labor times of anybody in the industry. Well, that would be ridiculous, but by reducing prices and then you in turn passing it back to your customer, the customer wins, the repair shop loses, and so does the part vendor. Anyway, back to the GPS. So there are 3 things that I see that a GPS does for us. 1, it shows you where you are. Now, if you're starting from home or a place you don't need the GPS to say you are here. But when you travel as much as some people do, I've traveled, Kevin, you've traveled a ton, you get into Chicago and you're from a small town like Cochrane, Alberta, and you think, where am I? And the GPS says you are here. And that's something that you need to know about your shop. You are here. Where am I at? The second thing your GPS says, it doesn't tell you where you want to go. You say to your GPS or your maps, I want to go to this address. And then it shows you step by step how to get from where you're at to where you need to be. And from a financial perspective, I see it's the same thing. Where are you? You tell it where you want to be. Benchmarks, we're going to cover some of those tonight, and we're going to give you a spreadsheet called Income Statement Analysis Tool that I've just mentioned, and you're going to be able to calculate where you're at. It will show you where you should be in each of, there's about 12 areas I suspect in that one. And then the idea is how to get from where you're at to where you need to be. And so sometimes with the excuse me, I got just got to take some water here, and I just got to get just one sec. The PowerPoint seems to have. I'm glad I don't use it a ton. I saw this on the internet, just a picture of you are here, and I thought that was kind of interesting. I did a Google search of you are here, and I thought, well, that's a big picture. I mean, you are here, and some people have an idea, kind of a sense of where they're at. Kevin and I were recently actually 3 different sessions, 2 actually with you, and we're at that one in Renfrew, Ontario, Canada, and the guy was working for his dad. He wasn't really familiar with what the sales were. He didn't know the labor to parts ratio. He didn't know a lot of these things, and he had an idea, a general idea. Well, when you want to know where you're here, that's a bit too big of a picture. You want to know it a little bit better than that. And oh, sorry. Okay, I just figured this out with the new mouse. This is a you are here. That's not a good place to be if you're a mouse and you see that you're in the belly of the snake. I've been self-employed for 30 years, and there are times I felt like I was in the belly of a snake. If you're looking straight down, it says you are here. That's a bit too small of a picture. That's a lot more of micromanagement. Whenever you go to a large mall or a large airport or whatever you've never been to before, you go to the screen. I love the ones now that are touch screen, and you choose which store you want to go to, and it shows you how to get from where you're at to where you need to be. But when you look at that screen, that map of the mall or the airport or whatever it is, the first thing we look for is you are here. And I love the maps that have this huge, great big red dot that says you are here. Okay, now I know where I'm at. Now I look at the store I want to go to or the gate I want to go to at the airport. I see where it is, and then I can see how I need to get from where I'm at to where I need to be. So it all starts with you are here, and the tool that I'm going to give you, the income statement analysis tool, is going to be able to help you with that. Now, tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to come out of here, and I want to show you what I consider the big picture. And this is what I call the power of team. Now, if you've been in sessions with me before, you know this spreadsheet really well. Kevin, I don't even know how many times you've seen me do this. What I find interesting about the spreadsheet that I created is I learn new things. In fact, Kevin, since I've met you 2 years ago, I've probably learned, 8 or 9 new things that the spreadsheet will do that I'd never even thought of before. There's a lot that you could do with this, and I'm going to be sending this to you. And this is how to calculate your monthly sales potential. And now there's other spreadsheets that I've got that go into more detail, but tonight we're looking at big picture. But it's all, to me, initially about productivity and efficiency. Nothing, absolutely nothing impacts your profitability more so than productivity, how much time your technicians spend working on income-producing work, and how fast they are at it. Nothing impacts your profitability. Your labor rate's important. Your gross profit's important. How much you pay for your rent is important. How much your gross profit on labor is important. But nothing impacts your profitability more so than selling the time. And because we look at goals of sales per month per technician, I have 168 hours here. The reason I did that is because in an average month, your technicians are there 168 hours. Sometimes it's 160, sometimes 176, but the average is 168. 40 hours a day, and there's about 4.2 weeks in the average month, a little less in February, usually a little bit more in April, May, etc. Productivity is how much time is spent working on income producing work, and that 60% is where the average shop is. The average shop is at about 60%. Their technicians spend about 60% of the day working on stuff that makes money. Waiting for parts doesn't make money. Waiting for work doesn't make money. Waiting for the advisor, trying to get the car off, what we call the rack 'em and stack 'em, where at the end of the day, you've got all these cars outside and you think, I don't want to leave them outside. And so you get as many parked as you possibly can inside. And you can get, 6 cars in a 3-lift shop, maybe 7 cars if you angle it this way, and you've got this car up in the lift and another one underneath, and hopefully it's not leaking oil. What they say about a Jaguar, if it's not leaking oil, it's empty. And the other is, why do they make a 2-seater Jag so you can take your mechanic with you? I'm making fun because I have to be the EnterTrainer, but I do own a Jag, so that's just kind of funny. But that's called the rack 'em and stack 'em, and that might take 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day, who knows? And in the morning, you can't just start work right away. You've got to get the car that's underneath that car out, and you back it out or push it out if it's not running. And so that's what we call the rack 'em and stack 'em. There's times where we are waiting for the customer's authorization. We're at a standstill because we can't get a hold of the customer for whatever reason. But I know this emphatically, that the average shop's productivity is only 60%. The average shop's efficiency is 100%, and that's where the time estimating guides come from. The guide calls for 2 hours. It takes the technician 2 hours, if the work is sold correctly. One of the things I see a lot of people do wrong is, more so in Canada, depending on where in the US, but colder climates, or climates like Ontario where they're putting salt on the roads. Where I live in Alberta, we don't use salt, we use rocks. And for the person on the line from Cochrane, Alberta, you know what that's like. We got rock chips. I was in Cochrane, had my windshield replaced, was driving back home 5 minutes later. I had another chip, a new chip in my brand new windshield, because that's what they do. They put rocks on the road here, or gravel. But in Ontario, when you've got all that rust, things are not as simple. There's going to be broken bolts and all this stuff's going to happen. You have to let the car thaw out before you can actually work on it and get all the snow off it. And you put it in, and you're the poor technician standing below this car with all the snow and melting and coming all over them. It's a horrible thing. I had a fellow up in Sudbury, Ontario, Canada, said, I hate winter. We make less money in the winter. And I said, why? He said, oh, these cars come in, you got to do all this. I said, then you need to charge more. And he didn't think it was fair. He said, well, how can I charge more? I said, because it's their car and something's wrong, and it's not your fault that it's rusted. It's not your fault that it's abused. It's not your fault that it has 372,000 kilometers. It's not your fault that the brother-in-law worked on it. When a job is non-routine, and we're talking about most jobs for us as independents are not routine. The question to ask yourself is, how many jobs come in your door that are cut and dry, get it in, get it out? If it's a brand new vehicle, for the most part, it is. And maybe the second and third year, unless it's got a huge amount of mileage on it. But for the most part, the first couple of years is pretty cut and dry, get it in, get it out. What percentage of brand new cars do you work on? 1 year old, 2 years old, 3 years old? I don't know if you've ever tracked it. We encourage you to at least track it once, maybe for a month, and find out what percentage of your cars are 1 year old, 2 years old, up to maybe 20 years old. And you'll see where the median amount is, not the average. Averages are deceptive. You know, if I'm 55 and you're 35, Kevin, the average is 45, yet neither one of us is 45. So don't just go with averages. You need to look at the median amount. Most shops are working on vehicles 7, 8, 9 years old. So that's no longer a routine task. I guess the question I'm asking you is, how many vehicles have you had in your shop that you'd wish you'd never seen in your whole life? That's what we're talking about. And why didn't we want it? Because it was rusted, because it had huge mileage, because it was abused, because it had been in an accident, because it's frozen, because it's rusted or whatever. If it's a non-routine task, you need to charge more. It's really that simple. Now, we're not talking about because the technician's slow or the technician didn't know what they were doing or we didn't have the right tools and equipment. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about things that are out of our control, something wrong with the vehicle, and our recommendation is that we add labor time for a vehicle. And just for the record, our recommendation is that you add 1/10 of an hour for each labor operation for every year old the vehicle is, starting in the 4th year. And I know that sounds complicated, but it's really not. What we're saying is 1, 2, 3 years old, use the book times. But when it gets into the 4th year, then we suggest that 4th year that you're adding 10% of the time. It's dollars time. It's whatever game you know, some people play the game. Well, we charge less per hour, but we charge you more time or vice versa. Anyway, just so you let you know, this session is being recorded and you will be receiving a copy of this, and you will be able to go back and maybe take better notes or come back to that part or parts that you wanted to spend a little bit more time on. But our recommendation is if the job is going to be more complicated, then you need to charge more, not because there's something wrong with us, but there's something with the vehicle. So if we make adjustments for non-routine tasks, and this vehicle's coming in the door and the book calls for 1.5, but it's rusted to the 9s, or it's been in an accident, or it's been abused, or somebody worked on it. You know how when somebody comes in and says, okay, I need an oil change, but the hood's a little tricky. There's a little accident, and so what you need to do is get some pliers, and if you pull this way and pop here, so an oil change that already doesn't make money is going to take an extra 10 minutes because we have to figure out that, or the wheel tool lock, where it's located, that kind of stuff. Y'all know what we're talking about. So that tells us that if the average technician is 100% efficient, if it's sold correctly, if it's not sold correctly and the tech takes longer, it's not going to be the tech's fault in this case. We only produced 100 hours. Now that's a big problem because we had 168 hours and we only sold 100. Could you imagine if you bought 168 spark plugs and you only sold 100? At a labor rate of $101 an hour, you're going to get the spreadsheet. You can put your own labor rate in there. That tells us that the labor potential is $10,180. The parts purchase potential along with that should be about $9,671.76. Now, the reason I separated parts from what we call the parts and the extra is because one of the things that's changed in the 30 years that I've been doing this is we used to say labor mix with parts would be 50-50. In other words, if you had $10,000 in labor, you should have about $10,000 in parts. That's no longer the case. Your labor sales should exceed your part sales. Your labor sales should be half of everything that you sell. So the labor potential, if you're doing $10,000, you should do about $9,600 worth of parts. But if you added the extras, and by that I mean sublet, tires, towing, shop supplies, and environmental fees, that should be dollar for dollar. And I can tell you, most people on this conversation are Canadian. I can tell you that I traveled all across Canada. I worked with a part company. I won't mention the name of the company, but I ran management groups all across Canada, and I literally mean from Vancouver Island to Newfoundland, okay? And I would have people bring their financial statements, and they would bring it to share with the group, which is very helpful, working together. And they would bring their financials, and the first thing I looked at, for example, if you showed me, Dean and Cochran, if you showed me your financials, the first thing I'd look at is labor and part sales. Kevin, if you showed me your financials for the first time, it doesn't matter who shows me their financials. The first thing I want to look at is sales. Which is higher, your labor sales or your part sales? And I can tell you the number of people that joined our groups, and I'm not saying everybody on this line. You guys are ahead of the curve. You're using the right software, and you guys are more of the, more of the elite of the industry. I can tell you that 100% of the people who joined our groups had more money from parts than labor. And that shouldn't be the case. Why? You sell labor at a higher gross profit. You'll see it shortly. Labor should be 70 to 75% gross profit. Parts should be 50. You're not going to get 75% gross profit on all of your parts. Some you will, but not all. It's not going to happen. You're not going to get 75% gross profit on tires and those other kinds of things. You sell more labor than parts. How often do people come into your shop and buy just a part? They buy a part over the counter. Now, some people sell parts over the counter. Okay, but most people don't. If you're a repair shop, the parts stores, they'll sell the part, and maybe you help buy parts for your employees and you sell them to your employees at cost or cost plus 10, or you help somebody out, or maybe you get a part for somebody that was hard to find. But hardly ever do you sell parts over the counter. How often do you sell labor without parts? Maybe not every single day, but absolutely every single week. There are times where somebody comes in, they think they need a brake inspection. They don't really need brakes, but they want a brake inspection because they just bought the car, or didn't stop as quickly as they thought, or there's a squeak or whatever, and we spend that half hour doing a proper brake inspection, and we didn't sell brakes because they didn't need them. Well, that's a half hour of labor with no parts. A person comes to you and they say, I'm looking at buying this van and I want to know if it's a good van. And so you inspect the van and you find all the stuff wrong and you say, this is not the vehicle you want to buy. They pay you for that inspection that you just did, but they didn't buy any parts because they don't own the vehicle. There are times where it's 3 hours of painstaking electrical diagnosis and the solution is a butt connector. There are times where we're inspecting a vehicle. In fact, I've done the math. In most shops, 83% of the vehicles that come in need to be inspected or diagnosed before we can work on them. Now, I've had some people say it's 100%, and that's not really accurate, because if somebody comes to you and they need an oil change because it's time, you don't need to inspect the vehicle to know they need an oil change. Now you're going to do an inspection along with the oil change, but you don't need to do inspection before you do the oil change to know if you need to do an oil change. So not every single vehicle, when they come in right now and say, put on my summer tires, you don't need to inspect to say, oh yeah, well these are winters. Like we just do it. So not every job that comes in, but 83% approximately. So the bottom line is you should see more money from labor than parts. Why are most shops upside down? Because it's a lot easier to give away time than it is to give away a part. I'm not going to give somebody an alternator. I'm not going to give somebody a starter. If this was a live class, I would ask this question. How much free work has your shop done? How many times have you spent 2 hours diagnosing a vehicle but you didn't charge 2 hours? You charged 1 hour, or you charged less because you didn't think it should take as long. And with the quick look-see, there's a guy out in Cochrane. He says, not the guy on the call right now, but there's another guy, you probably know who he is. And he said, well, do the quick look-see, the quick look-see. And I'd say, how much do we charge for a quick look-see? Okay, what does that cost? A lot of shops do what we call the PLO, the parking lot opinion, where you head out to the car to check out something and you didn't start an invoice, you don't even know their name, their address, their phone number, or maybe you do know the name, but you don't have the information in the database, and instead of starting with an invoice, let's just do a parking lot opinion where we head out to the vehicle and try to figure out something on the lot, and we're not getting paid for that. So it's a lot easier to give away time than it is to give away a part. Back to this, the parts and the extras to go along with that. For every dollar you sell in labor, you should sell approximately, not every job, you sell an engine or transmission, the labor is going to be less than that. So we're not saying every job. You don't track this every day. If you did, it would be micromanagement. But at the end of the month, the end of the quarter, the end of the year, half your money should have come from labor. The other half should have come from everything else that you sell. So the total performance would be about $20,000. If you're an average shop and you have 168 hours per tech in a month, they spend 75% of the day working on income-producing work. They're faster than these other technicians. Why? They've taken training. They're more motivated. They're more inspired. The shop has better equipment. We've got better resources. There's lots of reasons why a technician's more efficient. We're selling better kinds of work, more maintenance versus repair, for example. That produced 141 hours. Now, 141 hours is certainly better than 100, but it certainly isn't the 168. You don't want to buy 168 tires and sell 141 and not have any left. At the exact same labor rate, the labor sales, of course, go up. But when you sell the labor, when you're more productive, you spend more time working on cars, more efficient, faster at it, you should be selling more parts, more sublet, more tires, more towing, more shop supplies, and environmental fees. Not every single job. That's not what I'm saying. But like I said, with Rex in Toronto and these people in BC that do extremely well, these are people that understand when you sell those hours, you're going to sell, for the most part, everything to go along with it. So this shop's performance could be $28,000 in a month. This shop, 168 hours, same with the other shop, but they're 90% productive. And just to let you know, the highest productivity could be is 100%. It cannot exceed 100%. Kevin, if I'm working for you, and I've been at your shop for 8 hours, you say, Kelly, how much time did you spend working on cars today? And I say 11 hours. That's impossible. I was only there for 8. So I can't spend more than 8 working on income-producing work. I can bill out 9 hours in an 8-hour day because I'm fast. But that's efficiency. That's how fast I am. But productivity is how much time that I was there did I spend doing it. 90% is our goal. Why? Because you can't have 100% productivity. You can't have every technician every single day spend 100% of the day working on stuff that makes money. You'd have to have non-smoking technicians. They wouldn't be able to go to the bathroom. Maybe you could put them on the patch for the cigarettes or whatever, put in catheters. They didn't have to do that. It's not possible. I can tell you that there are shops out there, because of lots of reasons, that will spend 95% of the day working on income-producing work. Again, highest could be is 100. This shop, the technicians are more efficient, 125%, and I can tell you that the average awesome technician in Canada is 125% efficient overall. We sold 189 hours. We were only there for 168. You can't buy 168 tires and sell 189 of them. That's not possible. At the same labor rate, we're looking at 38,000, and here we've got 17,000. Now, I was going to show you one more thing, but let's do it for a year, okay? For one technician in a year, that's approximately 1,960 hours. The average technician is at our shop 40 hours a week and about 50 2 weeks in a year we have, but sometimes they're off for vacations and holidays. And in Canada, we have statutory holidays more so than the U.S. So the average technician, and if you have 3 weeks paid vacation for your technicians, when you get the spreadsheet, you can change that up. So what we're looking at now is what is the potential here. So in a year, if you're an average shop, your sales should be per tech about 237, and above average shop about 332,000, you should say, 445. Kevin, we had a fellow on the last webinar that we did who contacted me the next day and said, I've been doing this for 25 years, over 25 years, and he said, I still don't really understand the numbers. I asked him how many technicians he had. I used the spreadsheet. His shop, and I don't exaggerate stuff, should be doing $3.2 million a year. He was doing less than 1.1. In fact, when we did the spreadsheet specifically for his shop, he was actually below average. This is a shop that works hard. 5 technicians, he should be doing extremely well. I don't know if it's a productivity problem, an efficiency problem, I don't know. And by the way, his labor rate's $124 an hour, so that's certainly not the problem. Anyway, I wanted to show you this. I'm going to send you the spreadsheet. One last thing I want to show you, and I could spend a lot of time just on this with effective labor rate and all other things, but what I want to show you is why this is so profitable. Because let's go back to the 168. If your technician's at the shop 168 hours in a month, which is on average what it is, and you could do the spreadsheet for the day, for the week, for one technician, for all of your technicians combined. If your sales are $10,000 a month, you're paying for 168 hours of your technician's time. If your sales are $14,000 in a month, you're still paying for 168 hours. If your sales are $19,000, we're looking at labor only, your sales or your technician hours are still 168. What I'm saying to you, the brilliance of this is going from, in this case, $10,000 a month to $19,000 a month per technician, and your payroll is the same. This shop's payroll, this shop's payroll, this shop's payroll is pretty close. Maybe one pays their tech $2 an hour more, or $3 an hour. That's peanuts. That's picking up rice at weddings. That's putting your fax machine paper in backwards. What we're looking at here is your payroll is, if they're flat rate, that's not the case. But most people in Canada at least pay hourly, so you're paying for 168 hours even if you only sell 100. You're paying for 160 hours even if you only sell 141. The beauty is you're only paying for 168 even if you sell 189. So that's called the power of team. I spent a little bit more time on that than I normally would. Now what I want to do is I want to take a look at gross profit, and I'm going to turn it over to Kevin. And what Kevin's going to show you, I'm going to pull it up on my screen for him to see. And just so you know, Kevin, we're going to do it the typical way that we do it, with the typical gross profit calculator first, and then we're going to take a look at the algorithmic calculator. And because this is a GemCar class, if you could spend a few moments showing people where in GemCar. By the way, one thing about that shop that I went to that wasn't doing well, what happened was the father bought the software and was trained in it, then hired his son, but he wasn't trained in it. He didn't know how to use the software, and he wasn't using a parts matrix. He was defaulting it to list, and I watched how he was estimating jobs. He's a smart guy. He's a brilliant guy. He just never knew how the matrix worked. And Kevin, you'll make some comments about the matrix and how many people out there have different matrices even though they've got the same software.
Excellent. So hello everybody, Kevin once again, GemCar. So here for the gross profit calculator, Kelly designed this, and we've adapted this so that you can use it inside of your GemCar starting tonight or tomorrow. The configuration template is about the same. The fit, the feel, and the function is about the same. The only thing that this one doesn't have is the additional 2% margin that hopefully all of you are familiar with. that we encourage you to leave on. And I know a lot of you talked me out of it and said, oh, no, not now, maybe later. Now it's later. It's time to review this. So here's what happens. The gross profit calculator is, we can implement this into your GemCar, and we're just going to review how this is designed. So if we buy an item that's $3 or less, the idea is that you want to have a desired gross profit of 80%. So we would put a purchase price, let's say, Kelly, let's put in there, put $2.99, just so we can have it as an example. So we're going to purchase it at $2.99. The gross calculator would then tell you the selling price is $14.95. That's going to calculate an 80% gross profit on an item that cost you $2.99. The reason that we need to do this is because in order to get you at 50% gross profit at the end of the month, the items that are below in lower market, as the price increases, the margin needs to decrease because the market won't allow you to sell a transmission at an 80% gross profit. So all the little items that we carry through the shop, that the fuses, the light bulb, the exhaust clamp, those types of items have to be at a higher gross profit in order for your effective gross margin rate as an average at the end of the month to get you to the 50 or 55% where we want you to be. So the benefit of this tool is that in your GemCar, we can go ahead and copy this and put it in, or you could just put this on your desktop starting tomorrow, put in the prices and enter them what the purchase price is, and it'll automatically calculate the selling price. One of the things that Kelly designed out of this is that as the purchase price increases, you'll see the margin decreases. So if we have something in our sweet spot, let's say $25.01 to $35, Kelly, could you go ahead and put something at, let's say it's $30 purchase price, or 26, that's good. We're going to sell that item for $66.25. Now all of a sudden we're getting back to the reality where you all are feeling a little more comfortable, where you let me put the default margin at 40 or 50, because margin and gross profit, we can get into that a little bit later. But the idea is that when you enter this, it's very simple. It takes the emotional bank out of it. I bought it for $26.50. I need to sell it for $66.25 in order for it to be competitive. So as we move a little bit further, let's say that item is going to sell for $35.01. You want to, let's just do $35.01, please, Kelly. Thank you. So $35.01 and enter. We're able to see that it's $77.80. So one of the things is, as the price goes 1 penny more, I sacrificed 5% gross profit because an item went from $35 to $35.01. So that's where Kelly basically is going to make an improvement on this tool, and we're going to show that to you. And we're going to look at an item that is $2.99. We're going to make it $3. The selling price is $15. The minute it goes to $3.01, now we're selling an item for $12.04. So we're giving up $2.96 or $2.96 in profit dollars because that part went 1 penny more. So where he's taken this tool, and as I said, he's going to send this to you, and if you need help implementing it, it's on the FAQs. You can send me a note. I'm happy to help you implement it in your GemCar. So as soon as you enter an item that goes in, you put the selling price in, it'll automatically calculate and tell you what the price should be. Kelly, do you want to expand on that, or do you want to move to the next step? And Kelly, I'm sorry if you're speaking, you're muted. I'm not able to hear you.
Yeah, I was just pulling up the algorithmic one, sir.
Great. All right. Wonderful.
By the way, just for the record, the reason I put $26.50, that's just habit for me, because if you track what the average part cost for you is, we've done it, it's about $26.50 on average. Again, averages can be somewhat deceptive, but as Kevin rightly mentioned, your sweet spot is line 17 and 18, maybe 19 a little bit, but most of your parts prices are going to be between $25.01 for your cost to 45. So the sweet spot is right in there.
And so that sweet spot is very easy to calculate, especially in GemCar. You can print a report, go through it, or you can call your jobber and say, could you tell me what my average invoice is? And then divide it by the total number of invoices. They can do the math for you in a couple of seconds. So taking the tool that Kelly had built, the first one that he sent you, here's the algorithmic. The closest thing that I can give you is you activate the 2% additional margin on top of the parts matrix. So option, I think it's 105. I don't have it. My GemCar is not open. I think it's option, give me 1 second, and I'll give you the number. So if you wanted to activate it tomorrow, just to try it, It's 99. Option 99 in your general configuration. Go into configuration, general information, option 99. What will happen then is when you take an item, just in the example that we had, that Kelly had earlier, the purchase price, the benefit of this tool that he's revamped is that now all you have to do is just put a purchase price. So let's go ahead and put, as you see here, $3.01. We sell something. It tells us the purchase, what we paid, $3.01. We're selling it for $15.04. It breaks down the percentage, shows you the gross profit in dollars, and then gives you the amount. If I bought something for $35.01 in Kelly's example, it's going to then tell you you need to sell it for $87.53. There's no emotional bank. You don't have to think about it. You just put the number into the purchase price and let it calculate. As you can see on the left-hand side of where he's entering the prices, go ahead and do the $1,300. So $1,300 is only going to do a GP of 34.9. Excuse me, we're going to sell it for $2,000. This calculation probably works right in line with what everybody on this call is used to. You're taking it, times it by 1.5, or you're timesing it by 1.2, whatever the case may be. So as the total dollar is getting higher, then we realize that the margin needs to be compressed. But if you're not charging higher on the lower dollar items, you're never going to achieve a gross profit as an average over the course of the month. So this tool, Kelly basically made a major improvement on it from the first one that he showed you to this one, that if we take that item and we sell it for $3.01, we don't forfeit that 5% or 7% margin because there's an algorithmic mathematics that are running in the background. So basically when I sell it, it's now selling for $15.04 instead of the $12 that the other example was. Remember, it was like 15 and then it dropped to 12. So we left $2.96. The benefit of this algorithmic is we get the full 80% on the $2.99, and then everything above that then decreases 79.999, 79.8. So he's doing thousands of mathematical equations behind the scenes on the purchase price, and the desired gross profit is automatically tiered based on as it moves forward. So in GemCar, you can put this into your parts matrix. You go to your inventory management, click on parts matrix, and you can duplicate the lines that he has here and put the percentages in. And we're actually going to be talking about it tomorrow night. If you registered for the launch of version 9.2, there's going to be a live webinar that we'll be doing showing you step by step the new features in your GemCar. So you can go online, register for that, and you'll be able to see how you can implement this as well. Kelly, would you like to expand anything more in the parts
awesome.
matrix?
A couple of things just for the record. When I changed this, I wanted to make it simpler so that you didn't have to go down to the specific line, which you had to do before, which is fine. It was not a lot of extra work, but it saves, you know, a little bit of work. Less click, click, click. It's just click, click. And it also automatically tells you what the GP is. And so the issue that we said $3 when it went down to the next line reduced it by 5%. But now what we do, and again, there's tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of calculations behind, is that instead of going from 80 to 75%, which is how the matrix works, it actually went to 79.99. So in the background, it's going 79.98, 79.97. So you don't have to worry about that. All you need to do is my part cost me $75 and I am making 49.38% and I'm selling it for $148. And I tell you, even if you don't put this into your GemCar or you don't want to, or even if you're delayed, whatever reason, you can just have this spreadsheet right on. It's an Excel spreadsheet. Pull it up, and when you're doing your estimating, use this calculator. And one thing I like about it too is it shows you how much profit you're making on that, and then you're seeing the $148. So the selling price is right there, so you can just automatically transfer that over.
Kelly, just something as you were talking that I want to, for the group especially, because we're all GemCar, part of the GemCar family. So I really want to challenge you. If you've had GemCar and you've been using it for 6 months, a year, 3 years, 5 years, whatever the case may be, if I was your trainer, I pushed you from day one that it's time for you to review. Your emotional bank, you're too sensitive. You got to move forward. At the end of the day, you need to be profitable. And tools like this, if you won't take it from me, take it from Kelly and try it. Implement it. Kelly has a class on parts matrixing, and Kelly, I'm sorry, what's the name of the class that you offer for Parts Profit? Do you have a title for it?
Parts Profit Pro.
Okay, Parts Profit Pro. And basically, it's a webinar like what we're going through tonight, but if you're struggling with being able to justify, or what I'm telling you, you don't need to justify, you just need to do it. He has a very detailed, all the angles, all the emotional things that go along with it. Profit is not profanity. Profit is, it's legal. You shouldn't treat it like it's the redheaded stepchild and that you can't implement it. But here's a tool to second guess and challenge yourself on the things that are keeping you from implementing it. It's a simple tool. Put it on the desktop. Start challenging yourself and look at it. So I really encourage you to implement and try it and challenge yourself on what your belief system is on what you can charge for something. So with that, I'll be quiet, Kelly. I'm sorry.
No,
Thank
listen,
you for letting
I'm
me
so
contribute.
I'm glad you mentioned it. Could you send me an email? He's my moderator here. If you could send me an email, I will send everybody that workshop that we're just talking about. I will send you that as a complimentary session, which is not just how to do the parts matrixing, but how do you sell it? I mean, you have to have answers for your customers. And I have an article that you're automatically going to get as well. Tomorrow you're going to get this recording, and I'm going to send you the PowerPoint, and I'm going to send you these spreadsheets that I'm showing you. But again, Kevin, if you could remind me to send that.
I will.
Thought of that before. That's brilliant to suggest that. But there's the justification. What do you say when a customer says, but I saw it cheaper at the NEPA store, but the parts store around the corner was cheaper. I saw it on eBay for less. I saw it wherever. You need to have answers for those people. Canadian Tire sells it for less or whatever. What do you say to the people who say it was cheaper someplace else? And we can't get into all that right now because that in and of itself can be a 10, 15-minute discussion. And I have an article on that where customers today are more price savvy because of the internet. We had a fellow on the call last night from Gemcar who received an email yesterday from a customer that said, here's the work I need to have done. Here's what the time guide is. It shouldn't take you more than 3 hours. I've ordered the parts. How much are you going to charge? Here's a customer that says, I'm bringing in my own parts and I want you to not charge me any more than the guide said. Well, maybe they saw the guide online and maybe it was 2.2 hours for a new vehicle, but this one's 18 years old and has 472,000 kilometers. You're comparing apples with oranges. It's like saying how long is a string. So you have to have answers for customers, and especially, with dealing with the person who wants to bring in their own parts. What I think is funny, Kevin, is when people say, can I get a used part? It's usually a guy. Have you ever had a woman say, can I get a used part? Probably not. Or you've said, oh, don't worry about it, it's just the wife's car. You probably haven't had a woman say, don't worry about it, it's just my son's car. I don't need to get expensive stuff, I just need cheap stuff. But okay, I just lost my train of thought there for a second, Kevin. Oh yeah, can I get used parts? I recommend you say, sir, actually, you already have a used part. And if I understand you correctly, you would want to pay me to remove an 8-year-old part that has failed and replace it with another 8-year-old part. Is that what you're asking me, you moron? Now, you wouldn't say moron, but you need to let them know that it makes no sense. And if the part fails, then they're going to have to bring it back and you're going to have to charge them again. It's in your best interest, sir, for us to provide a premium quality part for the continued safety and reliability of the automobile. So I can get into, here's the problem. We've got maximum 2 hours here, and I could spend 2 hours on just selling diagnostic labor, as you've heard me do before, Kevin. But anyway, I wanted to show you this tool. This is the income statement analysis tool. For some of you, you're already doing this, okay? For lots of people, you're not. You're seeing something like this for the very first time. I'm sending this to you. It's called the Income Statement Analysis Tool. And what it is a tool that I believe is the minimum amount you should know about your shop every single month. Now, there's more stuff, but this is a good place to start. And I understand in some of your software, in case of Gemcar, there are reports that you can look at, but a lot of people don't look at them or they're not familiar with that. There's so many features in a program like Gemcar that I don't know anybody who uses all of it. I know, I mean, there's all of it's being used by people for sure, but I don't know anybody who's using every single tool. Like, I'm amazed when my 12-year-old son was showing me what my phone could actually do. It does more things than make phone calls. And the point is that we don't use devices to the full capacity. So anyway, if my point is you may have some of these reports in Gemcar. If you don't know how to do them, then learn that part. But I want to show you what I call the income statement analysis tool. This is a real shop, and I wanted to do it this way because this is a one-man shop. I wanted to use real numbers for a real shop. It's a Canadian shop. He does not, at this time, in this case, it was, I don't know what the period of time was, he did not have a full-time service advisor. He does now. In fact, he's in our management group. Kevin, you know who he is. And he's just setting up with Gemcar at this point. Anyway, I wanted to show it for a one-man shop, but you can fill in this data for your own shop. It doesn't matter if you have 5 technicians, 2 or 3 or whatever. All you need to do is plug in your labor sales, whatever they are for that period. You could do this for a month, you could do it for a quarter, you could do it for a year. Okay, I just scrolled that up. It's April 2016. Now I'm seeing his numbers month after month with him just as a technician, but now with a full-time advisor. And I know how this works. You look at this and think, how can I afford an advisor? Well, you can't look at what you're doing to figure out how you're going to afford an advisor. You need to look at what happens when I can sell an extra 2 hours a day. That's how I'm going to pay for the advisor. And back to that session in Ottawa, it was one of the few times in my 30-year career that I started to lose my patience. And I thought, okay, Kevin, this is a train the trainer session, and I'm trying to not be bold with these people, but here is this other guy that's going click, 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 and somebody else was coming to his defense, and they're making it sound like, Kelly, you don't understand, there's lots of money to be made in parts. And I said, look we're trying to show you how to do $45,000 a month per technician. And what you're doing is trying to make a little bit extra money here and a little bit more money there. I said, what you're talking about here is putting in paper in your fax machine backwards. And that was a bit bold and bolder than I would normally be, but the discussion had gone on too long. It wasn't fair to the vendor, and I just said, look, if they charge you less, you would make less. So let's focus on making some real serious money here and not trying to figure out how much I'm going to save a year by putting my paper in backwards. And by the way, a lot of that time where people are trying to buy parts better, as I mentioned, they sacrifice quality. They're getting poor quality sometimes. They sacrifice delivery. Yeah, well, that part vendor takes a lot longer, but it's cheaper. And sometimes you sacrifice the service from that particular vendor. If you buy a lot from a vendor, you have a big hammer. And if you buy a little here and a little there, and the other thing, of course, is the loyalty that you get and the benefits of that. Try to explain to your spouse or whatever that you won't be going on the cruise this year because you didn't buy enough from that vendor. Now, some people, they buy everything from that vendor because of the cruise or whatever it is that they're doing, or for the rebate, and that's an extra benefit. And by the way, one of the articles that I'm sending out to you is one that's I mentioned about selling parts and how to do that better, and I'm going to send you that webinar that I just mentioned. But at the same time, an article I wrote on loyalty and how loyalty helps you. It doesn't matter what part vendor, and I'm not promoting one particular vendor. What I'm saying is find a good vendor and stick with that vendor and become loyal, and things are going to run a whole lot smoother than buying a little here and a little bit there. We had a fellow last night, he said, I can buy parts anywhere. I'm buying parts from the person who's teaching me how to run my business better, and he's doing extremely good numbers. Anyway, so in April of 2016, again, you can fill this in for 1 month, 5 months, a full year, whatever. It doesn't matter. You can do it for a 5-month period. Whatever you put in there, what it's going to do, of course, is tell you what that is on a monthly basis. The percentages, of course, are going to be the same. The labor sales were 10,160, and as I mentioned, most shops, not all, but most shops, I'd say in Canada, it's close to 90 across the board. Yes, every one I've seen was 100, but I've not seen every shop in this country. But I've not seen somebody who gave me their income statement for the first time that their labor sales were actually higher. So he's got a labor leak for sure. You fill in your sublet, and by the way, that is sublet labor only. If it's a part that you got from the sublet vendor, just because you got it from a sublet vendor doesn't mean you should make less from that part or less on that part. We suggest that you still use the part matrix. He doesn't sell a lot in tires, and the shop supplies 436. Other is in case you want to add something else, like you sell parts over the counter, you rent out bays, you sell cars, whatever. You don't have to use that one. He doesn't, but it's there for you to use. And again, I'm sending this to you. The labor sales, just to be clear here, the cost of labor is the technician's wages only. It does not include any support staff. It does not include you yourself unless you are that technician, but you put in the direct wages. It does not include EI, CPP, workers' comp, holiday pay for the people that are on from the U.S., SUTA and FUTA. All we're looking at here is the direct wages. How much did they earn before we took off any benefits or burdens? The parts sales or purchases, I should say, were $7,258. His sublet cost him $2,694. His tires were $403, and he had no shop supply costs, which is fine. You don't have to break that down. You could if you want to, but you'd have to know each time you bought something from a part vendor, was it actually a shop supply, not a part? So we do recommend, if you don't want to go into that finite detail, we don't suggest that you do anyway, unless you're already doing it. It's nice to, but you don't have to. But you do want to track what you charge for shop supplies. And by the way, he only got 2% of his sales in shop supplies, and that really should be 8%. Kevin, can you send me an email as well and ask me to send out the parts kits as well? Some of you are in Ontario. You're not allowed to charge a percentage. You can't just say 8% shop supplies. So we have kits. In fact, you can build that into your gem car as well. I don't know if that gets covered tomorrow night or not. I have no idea. Anyway, you can build that in, and so people not only see 2% shop supplies and how much that is, a shop supply is, and it lists or shop supplies. It'll list the 7 things that are in that kit or the 6 things that are in that kit. In Ontario and some other provinces and some U.S. states as well, you're not allowed to charge a percentage. It's against the law. You can't charge it unless you quantify it. So if you say it was grease, it was whatever it was in the kits, and there's less questions from the customer because it's not 6% shop supplies, $18. It says this is what you got, ... and it was $18. And Kevin, what you guys did in GemCar blew me away when you go click, 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 what is actually included in that kit, and it breaks it down and charges for what was actually included in that kit. It's brilliant what you guys have done. The gross profit is simply the dollars that are left after we paid for what we sold. His gross profit on labor is 62%. His gross profit on parts is 40%. His gross profit on sublet is 20%. His tires, he's doing 30%. My God, he should just get into this tire business and get out of the repair business. In the way he's selling tires, he's good at it. Shop supplies, it shows 100, and we already talked about why. His labor rate at the time was $105. He is the only technician. He wrote 60 repair orders. Again, you get this information right from your gem car. The repair orders written in that period of time. He was open 20 days in April of 2016, and he was open 8 hours in a day. Now that's fictitious in my mind because he was not there 8 hours in a day. After the doors closed, he stayed. And there's people on this line that know that at 2 o'clock in the morning, you can get a lot of stuff done without the phone ringing and people interrupting. But the next day, you're completely bagged because you were up so late. Just so you know, the average manager is interrupted 232 times a day. And if you are a one-man show and you don't have somebody answering your phone, you do not work on a car to completion without interruption. And so that's when mistakes start to happen and the hours just don't get billed out. So now here, this is the GPS. Where are you? Right here. All of this information is where we're at. The percentages, the dollars, and as I mentioned, the percentages are even more important than the dollars. So this is where you're at here. GPS is saying this is where you should be, or we're telling it, and what we're seeing is what the variance is. So his overall gross profit is 47%. So after he paid for everything that he sold, he was left with 47 cents on the dollar, or 47%. He should be at 60, so his GP is low, 13%. His gross profit on his labor is 62%. It really should be 70%, so he's 8% low there. Parts gross profit, he's only at 40%. That sucks. For the purpose of training, we want it to be 45%. For the purpose of our management groups, we want it to be 50%, so he's 5% short there. Labor mix, only 38% of the money that came in the door came from labor. How do you sell at the time when you're interrupted and you're interrupted and you're interrupted? He should be at 50%. He's 12% low in selling labor. His hourly revenue is not too bad. He's doing $275.31 in an hour. He could have done $16,800 in April of 2016. He only, in labor only, he only did $10,160, so his shop proficiency was 60%. That means he sold 60% of the hours that he was there. We want to sell 112%. You saw that on what I called the power of team. He's 52% low. His average RO is not bad, $440. He's writing about 3 ROs in a day, so he doesn't have a car cam problem. He's only selling 1.6 hours per repair order, and he's actually doing pretty good with the net profit. Now, for the purpose of you filling this in this case, he filled in this information. And by the way, I mentioned about rent. His rent is $1,430. And I mentioned that the benchmark is 5%. So in April, it was only 5.4%. So he's a good expense manager. I'm sure he picks up rice after weddings. Actually, he's pretty cheap, which is fine. And I'm sure he puts the paper in backwards. But he's trying to focus on some good things, you know, and sell more time. And now he's got an advisor, as I mentioned. But I'm going to encourage you, for the purpose of doing this, at least for the first several times that you do it, do not fill in the expense lines, because these expense categories are not going to mirror image your income statement. It's not going to happen that way, or your gem card, whatever. We would never see two income statements exactly the same as far as the breakdown here. So I recommend that you take all of your expenses combined, and I like to use it on line 42, waste disposal. And let's say that your expenses for that month were, let's just say $11,200. So you put it all into one line, and then you're going to be able to see, now it's adding that with everything else that he's got on here. So this number is not what's important here. It's just that you would not have anything here. You would not have anything there, 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 there. So one line for all of your expenses combined, put it on line 42, because all that's going to do, if you fill that in, all it's going to do is show you the percentage of your sales that went to that. And as I mentioned, you should turn on your percentages if it's not already on in your QuickBooks or whatever you're using. So why take the time, all the extra time, to fill this in just to see percentages when, as I mentioned, you can see the percentages anyway. Literally in 5 to 10 minutes in a month, you would be able to complete this income statement analysis tool. One last thing I want to show you with his particular shop is, because he's not there 8 hours in a day, he's probably there closer to 12 hours in a day. So in reality, he could have done $25,200 a month in labor only. He only did $10,160. So his shop proficiency was 40%. Just so you know, the average shop here with proficiency is 45 to 55%. The average shop is only selling half of the labor, which means if you only sell half of the labor, you're probably only selling half of the parts and all the extras that I've mentioned earlier. The average shop, just so you know, can do as much in sales with half as many people. And I think most of us can relate to that. You've got a technician and they quit or they get fired. You don't replace them right away. And then you realize weeks later, months later, that you're actually, you're actually, I need to take some water, making as much money as you were in sales as with less technicians as you were with others. Okay, the last thing I want to share with you is, as I mentioned, there are two things that I've seen consistent with shops that do extremely well. Back to that meeting that Kevin and I were at, I learned a lot that day, Kevin. I learned a lot from you, and I learned a lot from that particular group of people. And by the way, that wasn't my first time there. I'd been there many times, but new people. Most of them were new, some were repeats. But I realized when somebody asked you the question, Kevin, about how much is GemCar, and you said it's what, $170 a month, whatever it was. And I looked at people's faces, and some people are thinking, where in the world am I going to get $170? And I've seen people say, but how am I going to pay for that? How am I going to pay for that? Oh, how much is that computer? How much is that software? And are we trying to figure out how we can come up with $170 a month? Or are we trying to figure out how we can generate sales of $40,000, $45,000, $50,000 a month? Now, 50 is a bit of a stretch for most people on this call. The person in Saskatoon with your labor rate well over 100, then yeah, you're going to be able to do at least $42,000 to $45,000 per tech per month. I would rather focus on where the money is going to come from, more so than trying to figure out how I can spend less of it going out the door. Where's the emphasis? What's the expression? You're stepping over dollars to pick up pennies. And sometimes the emphasis is in the wrong place. So the two things that I've seen that people do well, and I mentioned, I was going to go right through back through this, is most people, sorry, I'm getting used to a new mouse that's not what I'm looking for. The two things that I've seen that people do extremely well, as I mentioned in the flyer, two things they do. One, they're on their game. They know their numbers. As I mentioned, each of the shops that we went into that were doing extremely well with the fellow from Workers' Compensation, all of them were tracking productivity, proficiency, efficiency. They're all in a management group, and they're all on their numbers, and they're seeing actually a lot more data than we just looked at there. I want to talk about a management group. I think being in a management group is one of the absolute best things you can do for your business. When you are a hockey team, you can't just play the game with just a goalie. You can't play with just a center. You need centers, you need right wings, you need defense, and you need a goalie. And sometimes we're lacking something. We're lacking the financial part, or we're lacking the marketing part, or whatever it might be. But when you work together with other people who know things that you don't know, and you know things they don't know, working together is phenomenal. I ran a number of management groups across Canada. I ran management groups with WorldPac in the US, an amazing company, loved working with them. I launched a group in Northwest, which was the Seattle area. I launched a group in California, and we launched one that we called Calvada, because we had people from California, we had some people from Nevada, so I called it Calvada. And I'm going to take a little bit of extra time here, and I want to show you the composite that I was referring to. And this may seem like overkill to a lot of people, but I want to show you the information that I believe that we really ought to know. The first level is, for those of you that are not using like an income statement analysis tool, is to get into that and then eventually get to something that's a little bit more like this. The group that I just mentioned in California, by the way, one thing I'm really proud of is that I launched those groups, and if you go to the WorldPac website, each of those groups still exist. I launched them. It got turned over to another trainer when I started to work only in Canada again, because the travel was just getting way too much. And each of those groups still exists. And I'm thrilled to see something I started that 4 or 5 years later is still going, and these people are working together. This is a real shop in California, and ultimately this is where we believe you should be headed, the data that you should see. Who usually sees this kind of data is large businesses. Most small businesses do not have this information at their fingertips. And by the way, this is the best spreadsheet I've ever seen. I did not create this one. I purchased it from somebody who created it, which, by the way, was a bunch of people in BC who were in that group who built their spreadsheet, and I bought it, and rightly so. They did the work on putting it together. But this is the best I've seen. I've seen some other ones that I won't get into detail on. This one is bar none, the absolute best composite of all of them. And so this is what we run in our management groups. We just launched a management group. Our plan, just so you know, is to launch a management group specifically for GemCar users. And I'd love to see everybody singing from the same song sheet, so everybody that's on the monthly calls and the weekly calls, etc., are all using the exact same spreadsheets and software. And you've got two of us that are coaches with that, myself and Kevin, and I call Kevin the King. So what we'd like to see is the trending for your shop. So now you're seeing your data, not just the single spreadsheet that I showed you, you see 1 month at a time, which is a good place to start. But now what we want to see is adding the data to this more detailed spreadsheet. And so because it's an active spreadsheet, all you need to do is click over that little red thing, and it tells you exactly what goes into each of those boxes. This is far more complex than the one that I showed you, but with GPS, where are you headed? I think every shop owner ultimately should see minimum the income statement analysis tool information, and ultimately this is where you should be headed to. I love the fact that we see how many customers per month. So in January, again, this is a real shop. They had 41 new customers, 58 customers, 36, 40, 44, 40. And just to let you know, I'm not going to take time to show it to you tonight, but what we do is we take this even one step further, and once a month with other members of your group, you're now seeing your shop here and their shop here and this shop here and the other shop there, and now you're seeing how you compare with other people in the same industry. And as I mentioned, it doesn't matter if they're in Canada or the US. It doesn't matter if they're in Atlanta, Canada, or a large city like Toronto or Vancouver. It's all about percentages. You should be able to get as many new customers as you can in a month. It doesn't matter if you're in a big city or a small town. And so when we teach, I've taught for 30 years. I've changed some of the benchmarks over the years, but each benchmark remains the same for everywhere. So if I change the labor to parts ratio benchmark, that is taught everywhere I go, not just some places that I go. So back to this, you see how many new customers in the month, and all you do is fill in this data every single month, and in the group you're going to see exactly where you get that information from GemCar. Line 10, it's calculating for us that we're working on 6.52 cars in a day. I'm sure we've seen some of those 0.52s. When I was writing service, there was 1.5 cars in Canada, and some people I wanted to say there's 1.5 cars in Canada, and this one, sir, is one of those 0.5s they're talking about. Average dollars per repair order, it's calculating that they're doing $425.66. The labor dollars on average per repair order are $212. They're selling 242 hours per repair order. Their labor rate at the time was $110. We can see it went up just a little bit. Again, the shop is in Sacramento, California area. The effective labor rate to me is the most important calculation of all. You can say your labor rate's 110, but when you're doing an oil change, you're not collecting 110. When you're doing tire swaps, you're not making 110. If the job took 2 hours and you only got paid for 1, you're not getting paid 110. What you say you charge and how much you actually charge are two totally different things. And we had somebody on the call just April 12th, that lady Susan that I'd mentioned to you. She said, you know what, when I figured out how to fix our effective labor rate, that's when I started to be able to pay the bills. Just so you know how horrific it is, for example, let's take a look at this shop for this particular month. They were collecting $77.25 an hour, not $111, and their effective labor rate was 69%. The average independent repair shop only collects 67% of what they say the labor rate is. So if you say your labor rate's 100, it's probably closer to 67. I had a fellow that was on our call, Kevin. He just joined our management group. By the way, one of my favorite company names of all, the fellow's name's Jeff. He's in Atlanta, Canada. He works only on Volkswagens, and the name of his shop is the Old Volks Home. That's just brilliant, brilliant company name. Anyway, he went to a session he told me I did about 2 years ago in Toronto. He said, I went after your class and I increased my labor rate $5 an hour. I said, did anybody notice? He said, nobody even mentioned, nobody even noticed. Of course, they're not going to notice $5 an hour increase. If you're at 1.5 hours per repair order, that's $10 a visit, 3 times a year, $30 more in car repair than last year. It's a pittance. They're not even going to pay attention to that. Anyway, Kevin, I sent you the email. He said, Kelly, I should go to 100. I should go to 100. And on our last coaching call, he went from $87 an hour to $100 an hour. And Kevin, you saw the email. He said, why did I doubt you? I said, because it's really simple. Even if you say it's 100, it's probably only 67. And he calculated his effective labor rate, which at the time his labor rate was 87, but effectively it was only $47 an hour. And he's paying his technicians 25. There's no wonder he wasn't making very much money. He was trying to make it up in volume. And I could go on and talk for at least an hour on effective labor rate. Kevin, could you do this for me and add to my list of things to send out the article that I wrote called What is Your Effective Labor Rate? And just so you know, I've written close to 100 articles, so I'm not going to send all 100, but the one on effective labor rate, we'll go into that in more detail. My favorite calculation on all of the lines that you see there is right there. You say your labor rate's 111, but how much did you actually collect? Here's the scary math. Take how many hours you paid your technicians total last month, multiply that by what you say your labor rate is, and see what your labor sales would have been if you charge your customers what you say you charge an hour for every hour that you paid your technicians. And you're probably going to see a number close, hopefully higher than 67%. And by the way, dealerships on average are 136%. Why? They're on their productivity, they're on their efficiency, they're on their numbers, and most of them belong to a 20 group where they work together with other shops. And I'm sure there's a nicer way of saying this, and I probably shouldn't say it because it's being recorded, but in the United States, there's a company called NCM, I don't even know what it stands for, it doesn't matter. They have over 200 dealership groups where 20 dealership principals gather together once a month, and they share financial data, and they share their marketing, and I did this, and you should do that. And one of them, by the way, in Cochrane, for the guy that's on the phone in Cochrane, you might remember Alex Baum, who owned Cochrane Dodge, which now he owns the Cochrane Toyota dealership, and that I was there the other day. It's now CrossFit. It's not a dealership anymore. But I drove by Alex's Cochrane Dodge dealership one day, and every vehicle on the lot was white. I mean, that catches your attention. You drive by and go, what? All these white trucks, which was the #1 selling truck in Alberta at the time, was white, and every vehicle was white. And I thought, what's going on? And I look at the sign, and it said the white sale. And I thought, oh my God, that's creative. What happened was he was part of a Cochrane or a Dodge group. And so one week he got all the white vehicles, and then another person in the group that was a Dodge dealership got all the white vehicles, and he ran the white sale. And then they took all the white sale, and so they all worked together. And I'm not saying this about Alex Baum, that's not my point. But with NCM in the United States, they have over 200 groups for dealerships. Do you know how many they had at the time? I don't think it's changed. Maybe it has. But at the time they had one. They had one group for independent repair shops and over 200 for dealerships. And the question is, are there more independent repair shops in North America or are there more dealerships? We are huge as independents, but we don't work together. And so what I say, and I'm sure there's a nicer way, Kevin, maybe you can help me out with this, but what I say is, maybe it's because I was trained by Bob O'Connor, but that's the way he'd say it. Dealerships work together so they can screw people, and independents don't and screw ourselves. But it's when we share information together, and you could do this and I can do that and we can do this together, and we become a team, and that's what we call it, team. Together everyone accomplishes more, of course, what the typical acronym is. Anyway, so this shop got a bit better, 71%. Look, in May they did 90% of their effective labor rate. That is an extremely important number. And I'm not saying to collect 100% is easy. It is not easy. Neither is increasing productivity and efficiency. That doesn't happen overnight. You can change a labor rate tonight. You can start using the matrix tomorrow. Some things you can do bang, bang, bang. You do them and they're being done. But this stuff takes a little bit more time. And again, GPS is where are you? Where should you be? And then what's beautiful about implementation is let's get there. How do we get from where we're at? Let's go here, let's go here, let's go here. And together you see the group accomplishing a huge amount of things. Unbilled labor time, what that's telling us is there's two ways of looking at that. Is that can mean that they sold 80% of their time or they didn't sell 20% of the time. So the total of these, of course, is the total number of hours. Labor to parts ratio, as I mentioned, is an extremely important calculation. I'd say it's the second most important calculation. They were selling $111 worth of labor for every $100 in parts. Some months go down, some months go up, and that's okay. One thing I love about trending is you have a bad month and you think, oh, what a bad month. But then you look and go, okay, well, last month was pretty decent, and this next month was pretty decent. I mean, they went 113% there, 111. So this is a shop that is doing much better in selling labor than parts. I don't know what happened in July, but in a management group, we'd say, what happened in July? What happened there? And then they bounce back. And by the way, the nice thing about a management group is if you say you're going to do something, you say you're going to increase your labor rate, you can be sure a member from the group is going to call your shop and ask somebody else besides you what the labor rate is. And if you say you're going to start pre-booking appointments, you're going to get phone calls and emails from the person saying, how many appointments do you have? Did you increase your labor rate? Did you increase your parts GP? Are you using the matrix? And it's kind of nice to hold people accountable. By the way, one thing, when I wrote for Canadian Technician Magazine in Canada, one person said to sent a letter to the editor and said, if somebody needs Kelly the coach, that's what I've been called for years, Kelly the coach, if they need Kelly's help, they should have never started the business in the first place. And he wasn't talking about me specifically. He was saying that if you own a business and you need to get a coach, if you need to get training, if you need to learn something else, you should never have started in the first place. What he was saying, you should know everything before you start. And I thought, who is this moron? But I couldn't say that in writing. So I responded to the letter to the editor and I said, it's interesting that this person perceives that you don't need a coach after you start. And my response is that every professional athlete out there has a coach. Tiger Woods has a coach. Hockey players have coaches. Football players have 3 or 4 different coaches. We all have coaches. Phelps, the best swimmer in the entire world, has a coach that doesn't even swim. A coach doesn't have to be better at something than you are. That wouldn't even be possible. Who's better at golfing, Tiger Woods or his coach? Who's better at swimming, Phelps or his coach? If his coach was better, he'd be the one doing the swimming. A coach isn't just somebody who does something better than you. They encourage you, they motivate you, they correct you, they say you need to do better here and you're doing great there. And as a coach, you need to know when to be strong and when to get on somebody's case and when to put pressure and when to, the pats in the back. I think it's kind of a combination of being a cop and a coach together. Anyway, enough said about that. I don't want to go through every single line of this spreadsheet, but what we see here is where you simply enter your labor, your part sales. Okay, now, as I mentioned earlier, look at this shop. This is an American shop. These people had been in the group for maybe a year at this point. Their labor sales were $29,000. The part sales were $25,000. And just so you know, that's where this number comes from, 111%. So what that's telling us is that labor of 29,000 is 112% of the 25,000. So this is a shop that consistently, for the most part, is selling more money in labor than parts. Something went upside down in October. Now maybe that month they sold 2 transmissions and that's why it changed, but at least you know why that was the case. Shop supplies, they're in California. They weren't allowed to. sorry, and they should be using the kits, what the sublet labor sales were, and then we see the total revenue. Almost done here. We'll turn it over for questions. Their margin on labor showed 91%. I don't know how that, I know what happened. And this is true. She didn't pay her husband that month, and so she was getting free labor. You can't get 100% gross profit on something. She said, if you don't pay your husband much, you can. Anyway, this is a husband and wife shop. It's kind of funny. They were an awesome group. Benchmark 60%, and so obviously they are really good with their overall gross profit. 79%, 80%, that's actually extremely high. Gross profit on parts, and if it's lower than the benchmark, it's going to show up there as red. And so we can see month after month what the parts gross profit was, sublet, margin on tires, etc. I don't think they even sell tires. Again, I'm going to go through this really quickly. Facility expenses, I love the way this is broken down. On an income statement, it'll break it down alphabetically. What I like about this spreadsheet is that it breaks it down by category. So you can see for each month of the year that you trend this, how much of your money percentage went to each of these items. So dollar and percentage, so we can see that the total facility for the month of January, they spent $4,385, and there was 7.52% of the sales that went to facility expense. So you can see that pretty much remains fairly consistent month after month. The next category is vehicle expenses for shop-owned vehicles. So we can see how much money went to vehicles and the percentage of the sales. The financial expenses, we need to see this, amortization and depreciation. How much do we pay in Visa, MasterCard discounts, bank service charges, etc. Total vendor discounts, and so the total financial amount was $4,290. The administrative breaks it down by owner salary, management salary. By the way, look at, this is real numbers, how much these people were paying themselves. Again, she didn't pay her husband that month. I don't know what he did wrong, but she didn't pay him. She was looking after the money. But this month they paid themselves $12,000. I mean, there's a lot to be said about the shop because I know them individually, or personally I should say. Anyway, the total amount of the administrative expenses is $11,000, basically $900 that month, 20%. One thing I love about the marketing part is we see how much money went to advertise to bring in new customers, how much went to database marketing, and obviously they're really good at database marketing. That could be Facebook, that could be LinkedIn, it could be, Demand Force if you've got that, Customer Link. There's a whole bunch of those great Service Mechanic Net, etc., where it's constantly sending out emails to your database. Total marketing expenses, the percentage of that, I like to see. They don't even spend much money in advertising. Total expenses for the month. And what I love about this is the profit year to date, and that it carries this forward. It was one of my favorite things about this particular spreadsheet and why I chose to buy it, because we can see in January they made $15,000. Now again, $15,000 on top of their salary. Now it's going to be less the next month because she actually paid her husband that month. But you can see this, but I can't resist. We do this team building stuff in our group, and we ask you to do, to get to know each other. We say, okay, 2 truths and something that's not true. So everybody writes down 2 things that are true about themselves and 1 that's not true. It's 2 truths and a lie. And I've had some people say, well, I don't want to lie, and say, okay, tell you what, let's do it differently. List 2 things that are true about yourself and 1 that you wish was. How's that? So you can do the what if. Anyway, somebody on the sheet said, we were married, and I was married, divorced, and married back to the same person. I thought, well, is that the truth or is that the lie? And it was this couple here. They were married, divorced, and got remarried again. So that's an expensive way. Anyway, so maybe the month they got divorced was the month she didn't pay him. I don't know. It's kind of nice to get to know these people personally. And Kevin, as you know, I love people. I totally love people, and I eat the stuff up because I want to see people do better and better and better. And so the profit year to date. So you're seeing your profit year to date. So you think, oh, this wasn't a very good month, but we've made $37,000 this so far to date this year, $69,000, and they hadn't completed November because this was just up to October. Anyway, enough said about that. I just wanted to briefly talk about what the composite is. And again, I'm going to, yes.
Did you want to include the comparison between shop to shop? So that was 12 months with one shop,
I tell you what
which
I'm
you
going to
didn't include.
Okay, you know what? I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to just finish off what I'm going to look at here, and
Good.
then I'm
All right.
going to anybody who wants to stay on, I will show you the comparison from shop to shop, because it's one thing to see your trending, to look at your data and you see January, February, March, April, and we're getting better here, but we're going down there, so let's fix that. And one thing that's cool about this, Kevin, as you know, is you fix one thing and you think, oh, that's getting fixed. Oh, something else is falling apart. No, it was apart before. You didn't see it because you didn't fix this. So you fix this. I get so excited about this stuff, don't I? And you fix this, and then you think, oh my goodness, here's a problem here. For example, if your part sales exceed your labor sales, okay, and your parts gross profit sucks, it's 40% and it should be 50. So if your part sales exceed your labor sales and your GP is only 40, and you think, oh my God, I'm going to use the matrix, and now you get your parts GP from 40 to 50%, you feel good about that, and then all of a sudden your parts to labor ratio or your labor to parts ratio, you think, what? It's going backwards. Oh, no, it was already backwards, but you didn't see it before. And I find it frustrating when somebody's part sales exceed their labor sales, and yet their parts gross profit sucks. So if your parts gross profit was where it is, it's even worse. The worst I saw was a shop in Ontario that was $2.67 in parts for every dollar in labor, the worst I've ever seen, and their parts gross profit was 38%. You know what they were doing? They were thinking, well, you know, we're selling the parts, we can't really charge them much time for it, and they really perceived themselves as like a parts store where you got the part, but they'd install it for you almost for free because they were giving away the time. And anyway, 30 years of experience here, I'm you know, I could say way too much about all of this stuff. Anyway, I just want to show you some benefits of the management group. And then again, I'm going to turn this over to questions. I thank you for your patience. I'm more long-winded than I normally am. The team group membership benefits of being in a group, and again, we're launching a second group, which is now going to be a GemCar group. We have bi-weekly owner-manager online meetings. So that means every 2 weeks, we are going to be having meetings online. One is to show the composite and compare from one shop to another. So you fill in your monthly composite yourself. We train you how to do that. There's a webinar on how to do that. And then once a month, we look and see how everybody's comparing on all those lines of data. The other is a webinar where we're teaching information like we are right now. So every 2 weeks, once a month, you're on a call, a webinar like this, comparing information from one shop to the other, and everybody learns how we can all do things better. And then the other is a training portion. Then once a month, you are going to be doing coaching with myself and or Kevin. Sometimes it's both of us, sometimes one of us, depending on what the needs are. And then we also have one for service advisors. So to let you know that once a month, one of the things I wasn't keen on in groups is we didn't really involve the advisor. Your advisor is responsible for maintaining gross profit. Your advisor is responsible for labor to parts ratio. Your advisor is responsible, depending on how much leeway you give them, and if you tell them they can't use the matrix, then that's not their fault. But what I wanted to do is create a composite just for advisors, and we don't have the time to get into all the detail about that. But the advisors see only the top portion of that spreadsheet that I just showed you. So once a month, all of your advisors in the group get their own composite. Now they see I have the most pre-booked appointments, or I have the highest gross profit in labor this month, or I have the highest labor. It's all about competition. I love competition when we are competing against somebody else. And Kevin, he's got 2.6 hours per repairer. I know I can do better than Kevin. And next month I'm going to get up to 3. And Kevin sees me get to 3 and think, oh, Bennett caught up to me. I'm going to get to 3.5 or whatever. It becomes a game, because it really is. I mean, it's about competition. It's not just the fact that we as service advisors get a paycheck. And then I see somebody's doing better on the labor to parts ratio. So how do you do that? So the service advisors that are on the meeting once a month, we're looking at a composite that compares information. It doesn't show what the salaries are. It doesn't show how much you spend in rent. It doesn't show all of the expenses on the bottom. What they are seeing is the top portion. I believe Kevin and I put what we down to line 60, I think is what we did. And I'll show you that, by the way, for those of you that want to stay on after this ends. But I want to be fair to the people who are listening to the recording as well, because I've gone way over what I thought I would. The problem is the more you learn, you learn and you learn and you learn. It's harder to teach something because you could go into so much depth on each of these things. But the service advisors once a month get their own composite, and they get to compare how they're doing with the other advisors. And by the way, there's an online group as well. It's kind of like a Facebook where advisors share information between each other. That's where the composite goes to. And you're an advisor, Kevin, and you have a new inspection form that you just found that you love, and you upload it to the group. Everybody gets an email that says, hey, Kevin just uploaded this new thing. And then somebody else has an application for employment, an owner, because there's an owners group online and there's a service advisors group online. So if you have a new form or a new spreadsheet or something you've designed, let's share it with everybody. I'm going to give you what I have, you give me what you have, and so on there are all of these tools. So if you ever lose the tool, you think, oh, I can just go sign into the group and search down and find the inspection forms, or I can find, you know, the questions that you ask somebody when you're interviewing them, or how do you write an ad again? And you go online and print off what have been the most successful ads in hiring a technician or a service advisor. Number 3, you get access to all of the current and future online sessions, and what that simply means is every webinar that I've recorded. At the time I wrote this, it was 12. It's actually over 20 now. They're online webinars already done, and you get access to all of those. When you sign up to the group, you get an email one at a time, so you can keep them separate, and I showed you how to download those to your computer as well. So you get about 20 webinars as soon as you sign up. The comprehensive financial analysis tool that I just showed you. You also get the monthly full group composite, which again I'm going to show you after we end this if you want to stay on. Tool spreadsheets I have, Kevin, you've seen. I was telling Kevin one day I was going through old emails and I thought, oh, I forgot it. I found 2 workshops, Kevin, that I completely forgot that I'd written. You're doing things for 30 years. You think, oh my God. And anyway, sorry. Tool spreadsheets, forms, Kevin, you've seen some of the other tools like the value of selling 1 extra hour per day, what the net profit should be per technician. I just got this mind that loves to create creative things and help people. I love people. Annual live summit, that means once a year we have a live meeting and we hold it where the most members are, and now it's an opportunity to get to meet those people. When I ran the management groups for WorldPAC, again, there was one in Denver, there was one in Northern California, there was one in Seattle, another one in California, and once a year we met at the headquarters for WorldPAC in Newark, California, and we had all the members that wanted to make the trip that would come. And you would get to meet the people that you talked to online or heard about or saw them on the composite or whatever. The owner live great meeting, or sorry, group, online group that I talked about, that's all part of it as well. And also the service advisors have their own group where they're sharing information as well. I don't need to get into detail on that. I've already done that. Just to give you an idea of the webinars that I was talking about, I'll make this bigger for you. As I mentioned, I don't know why that's not changing it. You have access to all of the webinars. There's one that we put together called Manage Better 2017. Kevin's done a few of these with me. Another one called Improved Operations for Improved Profits, how to improve, your systems in place that you have in place. Improved communications. The question I ask here is, how many problems do you have? Problems are caused because of a lack of communication between the customer, the advisor, the tech, the advisor, and the customer. One of my favorite subjects, I have a few, drastically increase your diagnostic labor sales. That's a 2-hour webinar just on how to increase your diagnostic labor sales. I shouldn't say just, that's huge. And that's, by the way, the #1 reason people have more money from parts and labor. #1 is they don't charge correctly or don't charge for all of the diagnostics. Kevin, you've heard me say this. As a coach, I have 2 goals. 2, that's it. 1 is that you get paid for everything you do, and 2 is you get paid at the right amount of money. This is not a hobby we're running here as your shop. This is not a charity. This is a business. And I loved your comment earlier, there's nothing wrong with profit. It is a profit. That's what a business is for. You do things that you make money on. That's what a business is for. If you're not making money, just go work for somebody else and be a technician and have less stress, etc. But we're building a business, and it goes on from there. Another one of my favorites, it's actually almost a Hollywood style webinar that not a webinar, it was actually done live in studio, high def, and it's got some of the best graphics you could possibly imagine. Just so you know, by the way, that was done by Canadian technician in Canada, which is now called Cars, and they put together this Hollywood style. We did 3 days in the studio. That's an amazing 65 ways to increase car count. Again, it's not really a webinar, it's actual video. Mastering scheduling, how to be better at that. Another one called Tune Up Your Profits, Service Advisor Selling Skills, Service Advisor Essentials. 10 through 15 is a 5-part series called GPS Financial Management. That's all right from income statement analysis tool on how to complete the composite. There's a GemCar demo that Mike Kelly, some of you know Mike, he's a GemCar rep in British Columbia, a good friend of mine, and Kevin King, three of us put together a webinar and taught some things about GemCar that some people weren't aware of all the benefits. There's a lot of bells and whistles there. And another one on how to download webinars to your computer. All that to say that all of that is worth about $1,400 if you were to purchase it individually. And you know what, that's all I really want to cover. Well, one last thing, the financial tools that I mentioned, that I have many of them. Income statement analysis tool, I'm sending you that tonight. Power of Team, I'm sending that to you. Profit Builder software, something different. I can't send it to you. It belongs to the group. Plus, it's an executable file, so you can't email it. The Parchmetrics, I'm sending to you anyway. The algorithmic calculator, I'm sending it to you. Another amazing tool that I found recently called the Management and Profit Planner, and that's how to do all of the forecasting. In fact, Kevin, I didn't even talk about that spreadsheet, that it actually does all your forecasting as well. One called One Extra Sold Hour per Tech per Day. How much money could that be? Sales, gross profit, net per technician. I love that one, where you can see what your sales per technician should be per month, your gross profit sales on parts per technician per month, what your net profit should be, how much you can spend on rent per technician per month, and it goes on from there. There's a whole bunch more spreadsheets, and they're all, then there's materials that are only available to managers. I just want to really quickly look at the fees, the group membership fees, just so you know, because it was my 30th anniversary this year, I ended everything with a 30. And so the monthly membership fee is $330. Now, just so you know, the initial setup fee for everything we just talked about was $730. However, because some of these tools I'm sending it to you complimentary, I'm not going to turn around and then say, well, you got them free, but now you have to pay for them. So what we decided to do with this particular group is, instead of a $730 initial fee, it was $330. So the same that you would pay for a monthly fee. And Kevin, you've seen some people who, I don't want to run down the competition, but when I see somebody paying $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 in coaching fees, it bothers me, because I'm not saying it doesn't work, but you saw that one guy that was going off to California spending $399 a week for 3 years as paid up front, and all the trainings included, but you have to go to California. There's another company that does it, and they're a good company, but you have to go to another city. And if you live close, great, the training's free. But if you're flying across the country and you're paying for your hotels and the meals and all that, the nice thing about what we do is it's all available online. So you think, oh, I want to learn about scheduling, let's watch that webinar. Oh, I want to learn about the financials, let's watch that webinar. So I'm going to end it with that. The initial fee, instead of $330 or $730, it's $330. It includes all the tools that I mentioned. Some of them I'm sending you tonight anyway. And the monthly fee, $330, which includes 4 sessions a month for you at your shop, 3 of which are with you, the owner and manager, and 1 a month with the service advisors. I'm really looking forward to that part, and working directly with the service advisors and all the other things that I just mentioned. So first of all, this is the longest I've ever gone over. I truly apologize for that. Of course, those of you that are listening to the recorded session, you've probably paused me 15 times by now. But again, I'm sending this to you. So I'm sending you the spreadsheets that I told you that I would, the articles that I mentioned that I would. I'll send the parts kits. That is a great way to increase your parts sales or your shop supply sales. And I'm sending you the spreadsheet and the PowerPoint as well. So with that, we're done. I'm going to turn it over to questions in just a minute, but as Kevin suggested, I should show the composite for the group comparison. So Kevin, I'd like you to interact here. Again, this is a GemCar session. That's maybe one of my reasons why it took me longer, because we added the GemCar stuff. That's my excuse anyway. My story, I'm going to stick with it. Anyway, Kevin, do you want to comment here, and then I'm going to pull up the other spreadsheets. For those of you that need to go, thank you very much for your patience. I really appreciate it. Again, I didn't want to go this long, but there's so much to learn, and that's the neat thing. We never arrive. Nobody ever gets to a point where we know it all, because then life would become boring. Kevin, I can't even think about how many things you've seen me myself learn over the last couple of years, and things I've learned from you, and things that I've just, there's no reason to stop learning. Learning is one of the most exciting things that we can do. So if you need to go, thank you very much. I totally understand that. For those of you that want to stay on and watch a little bit more of the spreadsheet on how it compares shop to shop, to let you know, we are looking at real numbers here. These are not numbers I plugged into a spreadsheet. And by the way, I randomly chose that shop from Becky and Brian. I did not intentionally want to show you just that one. I have all of the group members that I had. I don't know how many members in total, but I could have chose any one of the individual shops. That just happens to be the one that I suggested. So with that, if you have any questions, please email me, kelly@kellythecoach.com. Just a reminder, tomorrow night is the session with Gemcar on the new release. And with that, we're done. Again, if you want to stay on board, that's great. You want to ask questions, I'm going to open that up for that. And Kevin, I'll turn it over to you, sir. My God, I'm talking fast.
Right. Kelly, could you just click on that bottom slide you have there, that handsome silver-haired guy, and you leaning on your logo? That'd be great, because there's a lot of people that are on the call that have never seen me or don't know. So that would be Kevin on the right there with the Gemcar gear. If I've met you at a trade show, that's an incredible likeness of me as well. So this way, at least you
Kevin,
know what I look like.
Kevin,
Yes.
how is it that I look younger than you? How's that possible?
It's your natural charisma coming out.
Okay, well, that's an old picture of me. And if you saw me right now, by the way, I look like a hippie. I'm growing my hair to donate it. My mother died several years ago. I cut off my hair, shaved it in honor of her. And this year on her birthday, I'm donating hair. So I've been growing it like crazy. But I'm glad to be 55 years old and have a complete full head of hair and no gray as of yet. Oh, sorry, Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, no, mine's silver. Mine's not gray, it's silver.
I apologize.
No, it's good.
Okay, go ahead, Kevin.
So,
I'm just going to pull out the other spreadsheet.
No, I want to thank everybody for participating in. We have a really robust webinar series that we're going to be launching for Gemcar for additional training as well, so that to help you learn and master your Gemcar. Your original 10 hours of training was not designed to make it so that you could master Gemcar. So we are organizing, and we're going to be putting more material like this. Kelly, what he offers is business management, financial literacy to help you understand your business, the GPS, how to move forward. We're going to continue. I've developed 6 or 7 different modules that we're going to be launching, and you will get direct emails. You'll see it on the website. You'll also have it in your updates from Gemcar, letting you know the next session of what's going to be available. We're really going to focus on making punch clock, how efficiency reports, being able to capture that, tire sales, customer retention module, demographic sales. So we're going to help you understand a little more of your Gemcar so that it really becomes a tool that you feel like you can engage, continue to get ongoing information, but not only can you learn it yourself, but you can share it with your people. When I did the training with you, I probably worked just with you one-on-one, and now it's gotten to be 6 months, a year, 3 years later. There's a lot of new stuff that's there, and we're constantly adding. So our goal is to really get in front of you and make sure that you know that it's available. The webinars are going to be promoted, and they'll be pushed directly to you. If you care to engage, that's great. If you want recordings of them, you'll always be able to contact me, as I'll be doing the English stuff. So it's kking, as in Kevin King, at v2v.ca. So at any time you have a question, if it's Gemcar related, I'm happy to help you. Maybe I don't have the first-hand knowledge, but I can get you in touch with somebody in the company that can help you. So I'm really grateful for you committing the time and sitting through tonight, and I'm really excited about the opportunity that we're going to have to be able to give you high-quality information delivered right to your computer so you can watch it. Maybe it's a recording from an iPad. You're going to watch it on a PC weekend. And if there's something I can do for you, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always available. So Kelly, I really thank you for your knowledge and what you shared with the group. It's going to be a great course.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. You know, in some ways, training is my favorite thing, and then sometimes it's management groups, because in a management group, you really start to see improvement one level after another. As I mentioned with the sessions that I did with that fellow in BC, retraining him with workers' compensation, to go and see the shops of people, I almost get emotional here. It's just kind of interesting that I launched the group on my birthday, and then the whole conversation with Bob on his 55th birthday, and years later now I'm 55, but to go and see the shops of people that were in a group in 92, and I think this is longevity. This isn't something that'll work today and not work tomorrow. And as you know, Kevin, I'm not one of those trainers that intentionally inspires. If you get inspired by me, I love that. That's something that happens just naturally. But this stuff works. That's the incredible thing about it. We're talking about stuff that works. I don't like the rah. People say you can believe it, you can achieve it, and put the, you know, the picture of the motorcycle on your fridge. And I'm not saying that doesn't work, but it can be so highfalutin. I want to know if this stuff works. I mean, show me how to do this. Charge more for your parts. How do I do that? Well, here's a webinar and what you say to people. I'm going to send that to you. Here's what you say when people question your pricing, and here's what you talk about your warranty, etc. And here's how you use the parts matrix. And guess what? The next thing you know, you're seeing the increase in gross profit that you wanted to. Anyway, what I'm going to do is to be able to turn this over to questions, and then I'm going to take a look at this spreadsheet. Kevin, thank you, sir. It has been a pleasure. I tell you, honestly, I've worked in this industry 30 years. There's not one person that I'd rather do this with more than you, Kevin. And, you know, sometimes, you know, they say, how do you feel after you've been with somebody? You know, you're with them, do you feel worse about yourself? Do you feel better about yourself? Do you feel stupid? And then you get around people, and Kevin and I sometimes will say, Kevin, I need to talk to somebody intelligent, okay? It's been a bad day, or you get beat up by somebody and you say, hey, Kelly, I need to get pumped up again. And that's the cool thing about working together is you feed each other and you help each other and you work together. And there's people that just pull you down, and you just have to spend time with people who, and Kevin, I get so excited. Last night we were on the phone for what, 3.5 hours on that call? It was my favorite call that we've had. Anyway, I'm going to turn over to questions. You can feel free to do it in the chat. If you want to have your mic unmuted, please just let me know. From my experience, if I unmute everybody, it'll get way too loud. And so what I'd like to do is just open it up to questions. You can use the chat there. And again, if you want your mic unmuted, we have the power to do that. You know, what's amazing to see is this is the longest we've ever gone, Kevin, and this is the most people who've stayed on this long. This is pretty neat. We were at 18 people, and we're at 14 still, 2.5 hours into this. And it's late if you're in Atlantic, Canada, especially Eastern Canada or Eastern US, 10:30. Somebody said, thanks, fellas. You're welcome. Okay, tell you what I want to do. I'm going to show you this spreadsheet, how it compares. And so one thing, again, we're talking about progression, right? It starts with income statement analysis tools. Some of you are already there. You already know that stuff. That's great. But for those of you that don't, that's a good place to start. The income statement analysis tool, I don't exaggerate, 5 to 10 minutes a month, you're going to see that data. And what I encourage you to do is to do maybe the most current month. Let's say you do last month. And then eventually go back and, for example, this year we do January and February and March. And so you can see, now the trending isn't side by side like it is here, but you can see how you're progressing in each of these areas. So I encourage people to do 1 month. And then when you're comfortable with that, then go back. I've had people say, you know what I did is I went back and did all of last year. I put January, February, March into each individual ISAT, and I keep them. We had a fellow on the call who took training from me in York, Pennsylvania 15 years ago, and he said, I've done my ISAT every single month since. He's actually in our group. That's the fellow in York, Pennsylvania, Kevin. Anyway, so it's one thing to see your income statement analysis tool and the benchmarks there and where you're at. Again, GPS, where are you? Where should you be? How do you get there? And then there is the composite where you see yourself each month, month after month, and you do that yourself. So you're entering the data. You understand how the math works because you're entering it. And one of the work sessions I teach is how to do it manually first so you understand all the calculations. And of course, you're going to get that webinar for you in the group anyway. But and then it's neat to see trending. How did I do this month, this month, this month, and I'm getting better here. And this problem got fixed, and I see another problem popped up that I couldn't see before, so now let's work on that one. There's always something to work on. You never totally arrive. Then it's another level to be able to, you know what? I'm just going to do, oh boy, there's just so much, isn't there, Kevin? Let me show you one more. Okay, you know what? I can show it with the spreadsheet. No, that's the blank one, sorry. We're going into much more stuff than I thought we would. Okay, I'm going to bring you back to the group composite. It's the same composite. I'm not going to go through all the lines. There's absolutely no need to. But now what you're doing is you're seeing each of the shops, and the one that I showed you is included here. Now you're going to notice that some people just left it defaulted at 1. We default everything at 1. It just makes the spreadsheet easier to look at. And so not everybody fills in everything every month, and that's the point. When you start doing this, if you waited till you had every line of data to even finish it, that would be crazy. Fill in as much as you can. It's going to give you the answers to everything that you fill in instantly. If you don't know something, move on to something else. That's okay. And then you see a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. I can tell you when I sent this spreadsheet to a company here in Canada that hired me to do coaching, they said, what do you have for composite? I sent them this, and the response was, you're kidding. This is ridiculous. This is overkill. I said, it has to be. If you're asking me to train the elite of the elite, the best in the industry from your perspective, and you want me to coach them, and I come in with the income statement analysis tool, and they're already doing twice as much as that, they're going to go, what's this? I've already been to kindergarten, or I've already been to grade 5. I said, it has to be beyond that. Another company that looked at this said, this is way too much. People won't fill it in. I can tell you, and Kevin, you know, I don't exaggerate. I work hard to not exaggerate. This is a real group that had 7 shops, and all 7 were reporting. This was a California group. In fact, this is the Calvada group. Okay, so we have people here from California and Nevada. The group had 100% reporting. Northwest group, mainly Seattle and the area, had 100% reporting. Denver had 100% reporting. The point is that if it was just training, we wouldn't have that. But if you're being held up, and Kevin, you haven't supplied your numbers yet, so we can't send out the full group composite, you're going to get people calling you and say, Kevin, get your poop in a group and get your numbers in so the rest of us can see how you rank with everybody else. So working together, it's like having a, what do you say, a buddy for working out? How do you say that, Kevin?
Yeah, you get a gym membership, but the difference between a gym membership and a workout buddy is we're here to help you. We're here to make sure that you're going to go to the gym. You're going to actually hit those goals. You're at least going to walk through the door. You may not apply 500% of everything you're doing, but now you've got a gym buddy that's going to push you. Like, hey, Tuesday, let's go, 6 o'clock.
You know, I can't resist saying this, but there was a guy in one of our groups who had bought some software. I won't mention the name of it. It was in the U.S. And he was having some struggles with it. Didn't have the support like this software does. And another guy said, hey, I've been using that for years. I'll help you. So he was going from his shop. They lived in the same city, so that was fortunate. But he would go literally across town, and he was helping him learn the software. And he said, but you can't do this for free. I have to pay you. He said, no, I don't want you to pay me. But he said, I don't have my workout buddy anymore. He moved away. Would you mind being my workout buddy? And I was almost in tears watching this unfold in front of me. Here's this guy helping this guy with the software, and here's the other guy saying, hey, tell you what, can you be my gym buddy so I can get back into getting back in shape again? To see people working together, as independents, we are not competitors one to another. The mass merchandisers are the competitors. The dealerships could be the competitors, the do-it-yourselfers. But as independent repair shops, we are not competition one to another. We're all in the same team and helping each other out. So now, again, this is one step further where we're showing shop after shop. So this shop has 71 new customers. This person obviously didn't fill it in, and that's okay. And this person had 32 new customers that month. And this person had, this is August 2011, just so you know, this stuff's been around for a while, this stuff works. So if you're sitting there and you've only got 43 customers that month, and this person has 71, you go, how did you do that? And they tell you what they did. I don't want to get into the quick ratio, that kind of stuff. Let's take a look at what we call the KPIs, the key performance indicators, which is where the color changes here. This data you fill in, these are your answers. So this shop is doing 10 repairs a day. The shop's only doing 4.87. Now you think, well, this shop's better because it's got more cars in a day. But this shop here is doing $604 in a day, and this shop's doing $616. So their hours, the dollars are about the same. So then you'd want to know, well, how did you get your car count up to there? Maybe this was his slow month. This was August, so that it shouldn't have been a slow month in California. By the way, somebody sent me an email and said, hey, you know, you're doing this workshop in the winter. It's like, yeah, but there's people that are in warmer places that don't have winter and they don't have tire changeovers, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Anyway, so you get to see car count. The shop has really poor car count, so we want to help them I think that's the shop in Nevada, I'm not positive. Then we see average dollars per repair order. So this shop, by the way, this shop here, I know where that is. That's in Reno. And they do a lot of what they call the inspections for the vehicles in that particular area. So he's got higher car count, lower invoice. $116 an hour, 102, 127. This shop here was the last shop to join. That's why they're shop 7. Take a look at this. This shop needed some help. They, at the time when they joined the group, had $22,000 in receivables. And this wasn't fleet business. This was, okay, Mrs. Johnson, you can pay me next month. Okay, so-and-so. And all of this money was owed to them. They were doing extremely poor sales, and worse than that, the owner was on the counter giving away the farm and had a heart for people. And I said this, I actually took his financials, Kevin, and I crossed off the name of the shop on top, and I wrote down Charity Automotive, and I handed him back the financial statement. Why? Because I cared and I wanted to see him and his wife do better. I got to be friends with these people. They're still in business. They do extremely well. They're still in the group is what I meant to say there. They obviously didn't fill some numbers in right here, but that's okay. They filled in what they could. They're new to the group. These people here had been there a little bit longer. Labor to parts ratio, again, as I mentioned, every shop that joined a group in Canada, and by the way, I'm not trying to pick on Canadians at all. Usually I pick on Americans, actually. I've been to all 50 states. I love Americans. I love Canada. They're both great countries. In Canada, what I've seen, and I can't tell you I know why, but in Canada, for the most part, not black and white, but we are better at selling parts than labor. In the United States, they're better at selling labor than parts, which doesn't make sense to me, because in Canada, we have a licensing program. You have to be a licensed technician. You go through an apprenticeship program, and then you become a licensed tech. So if your ad says licensed tech, the people that respond are licensed. Then you know that they've put in, what, 6,000 to 8,000 hours is what it turns out to, something that's insane depending on what province you're in. In the United States, there's no licensing. It doesn't exist. There's no such thing as a licensed technician. Now they have ASC certifications, which we have here as well, and you can be an ASC certified tech, and you can advertise ASC certified tech, but there's no ads that say licensed techs because in the US there's no such thing as licensing. So what I say in Canada is we run an ad that say licensed tech, and in the US you say, is your toolbox bigger than your tackle box? Because if it is, you can come and be a mechanic for us. Okay, I'm just trying to bug the people in the South, but the point is that we have better technicians in that they're better trained because of the apprenticeship program overall. There's some lousy techs in Canada, there's some great techs in the US. That's not what I'm trying to say. But isn't it interesting that the country that has the licensing, the most amount of hours to become a licensed technician, a lot more than becoming ASC certified, that's for sure, and you need the experience. ASC is just tests. That's all it is writing tests. In Canada, the apprenticeship program is hours on cars and vehicles, work experience, and school. So why would it be that we have better technicians in the sense of training, and yet we charge less for that? We're better at selling parts and labor. And in the US, they're better at selling labor than parts. I'd love to see that change, and for some shops, of course, it is. The labor to parts ratio at this shop, $1.04 in labor for every dollar in just parts. And then this is not labor mix. We're not looking at labor versus parts, sublet, tires, towing, shop supplies, and environmental fees. We're simply looking at labor versus parts. So they're $1.04, $1.15, $1.09, $2.30. Now I'm sure that's not that way every single month. I do know that that is the shop that spends a lot of time on the inspections, as I mentioned. The shop's only 90%, so they're selling 90 cents in labor for every dollar in parts. 96, the shop's not doing too badly there. So they suck at the receivables, or I guess maybe they're king of receivables. So Trump came to mind. And $1.07 at that shop is pretty decent there. We see the labor sales, honestly, in a group, we don't care about that. Just because this shop's doing 80 and this shop's doing 150, you may want to have this shop instead of that shop because they're making more money off the 62 than the shops at the 150. I'm not saying that's the case here, but it can be the case, and I've seen that to be the case. This shop's doing 68% gross profit on labor. We want 70 to 75. This shop does pretty good there. This shop's pretty close. This shop's almost exactly there. Little low, little low. Look at this shop. The guy who's the nicest guy is giving away the most amount of time. And I said, doesn't matter. You could even do more work, but you're not getting paid for it anyway. So do less work and not get paid for it instead of doing the work and not getting paid for it. Oh, I love people. You should see the look on that guy's face when I said that. You know what? He's changed. I don't say it to insult people. I say it to inspire people. Parts gross profit, this shop's at 45, 47. This guy's at 33. Wow, that sucks. The shop's at 55, 40, 60. You think 60? How did you do that? Well, this guy, look at that guy. He doesn't even sell his parts correctly. And he's anyway, Charity Automotive. Gross profit on tires. Some people sell tires, some people don't. This is California, so there's certainly not a winter tire changeover experience happening there. Again, I don't want to cover all of this, but isn't it neat to be able to see month after month how your shop is doing compared to other shops? And because we don't look at sales dollars, we look at percentages for everything. It doesn't matter if somebody's labor rate's higher because you're probably spending more money on rent and for the technicians, etc. But I do want to show you this. And I've never seen it actually looking at it forecasting, because we don't forecast for the entire group. But what you do is you go into your spreadsheet and you put what you would like to do in each of these areas for the month, and then it's going to start to show you your variance. So what did you actually do? What did you say you were going to do? And then you can see the variance. So you can look at June and say, okay, I actually did this in June. This is what I thought I would do in June. Now, this is, I'm showing it to you for the whole group combined. That's why it's not coming out right. But when you do it individually, then you see this information, and then you see the variance. But you also see the year-to-date actual, the forecast, and the variance. So even though this month you say, well, I didn't do as well as I forecasted, but year-to-date I'm doing pretty good, so I'm not going to beat myself up over that. So the spreadsheet does three things. You track the information, it shows your trending, and then you get to see your actual versus your forecast month after month, and then you actually get to see how you compare with other shops. So this data is so extremely valuable. If every shop knew this kind of information, and I'm not exaggerating this, but by the way, the shops that I mentioned that were in British Columbia that I went to, all 5 of them used this exact same composite. They were the ones that built this composite. Now again, some of it was built on our data. And by the way, Kevin, one of the things I love about Matthew at Gemcar and Gemcar is you'll see me do something and the next day the software added that. I talked about the time breakdown for technicians, and a couple days later that changed. We talk about, you know, when a technician's not working on a car, they're working, you know, on the counter, or they're waiting for parts or waiting for the customer, and we called them E-account codes, and we had E1 through 10. And 2 days later, I see an email from Matthew that you changed that to be that, and you put in the parts matrix that we showed. So to see a software company that goes, oh, there's a better way, let's add that to our software. There's a better way, let's add that to our software. So the fact that you guys are a company that gets better and better and better, I get really excited about that as well. So that is the forecasting I wanted to show you, but it also shows you the comparison. Okay, so questions? Another thank you, you're welcome. To see this many people still on this call, almost 3 hours into this thing, is encouraging to me. When I said earlier that you as a group are ahead of the game, I didn't say that just you know, to say it. It's true. When people invest in shop management software, you're not trying to figure out how you're going to spend $170 a month. You're trying to figure out how can I increase and increase and increase and increase. And even if you did the 2% on your parts GP alone, that and more is going to pay for the software. You know, a good example of that would be the airline industry. When the price of fuel increased, airlines didn't go, oh, well, hopefully the price of gas is going to go down, because if it doesn't, we're not going to make as much money. We're just going to make less because of the price of fuel. They had to change the way they ran their business. And the question should never be, how will I pay for Gemcar? The question should never be, how will I buy that piece of equipment? The question should never be, how am I going to paint my building? The question shouldn't be, how do I get these new computers? The question isn't, how do I get a better website? The question isn't, how are you going to pay for that? The question is, how are you going to charge so that you can do that? Because the customer benefits from a nicer facility. The customer benefits from a more efficient software program. The customer benefits from all the changes that we make. So the question isn't, how do I pay for this? You don't look at how much money you're making and think, oh, I can't afford that. You think, if I get that, my sales are going to increase, and that's where the money's going to come from. So airlines had to do something. They had to. We weren't excited to start paying for luggage, but we had to. We weren't excited that they took away our food, but we had to. We had to, because if they didn't, they wouldn't be a business. And how would we function as a country if the airlines weren't around? I mean, the country would come to a halt because so many things are transported by flight. And now we're accustomed to it. So the question wasn't, how are we going to pay for fuel? The customer's going to pay for fuel. And for a while, they had fuel service charges because they had to. And then they, again, as I mentioned, they started charging for luggage. I know somebody that was with U.S. Airways. This is going back probably 4 years. And he said, you know, last year we did $1 billion in sales in luggage alone. And yet, I wanted to say, well, he wouldn't know the answer, but how much more has United or U.S. Airways spent on fuel this past year? That $1 billion doesn't go to the bottom line. The $1 billion contributes to the extra cost of fuel. Okay, questions? Okay, so I want to go. This fellow says Americans pay less for their parts, and if you compare the dollar, you're right, especially right now with the exchange rate. That's a good point. And you compare the dollar ratio of parts to labor on the same job in the U.S. and Canada, their labor ratio will be higher. Okay, that's a good reason for that. For this reason, the parts business suffer in Canada due to cross-border purchasing. You're absolutely correct. So we need to make changes in how we do that. And by the way, when vendors here reduce their price to try to become more competitive, that actually hurts most shops. It doesn't help. Okay, so it just goes into a good example. So thank you for sharing that. That's a good point. Yes, things are much cheaper in the U.S. I mean, you take a look at airfare in Canada compared to airfare in the U.S. It's just completely insane what we pay in Canada. Give an example of that. I was going to fly from Vancouver to Toronto, a last-minute ticket, which was $660, and yet I could fly from Vancouver that same day to Barbados for $260, and guess what? The plane was changing in Toronto. Well, I got to tell you honestly, I shouldn't say this recorded, but I actually bought the ticket to Barbados and got off the plane in Toronto and did not get on the next plane. I just told them I couldn't continue on, and they said okay. So they, took me off the flight. I don't mean physically like they did recently in the U.S., but anyway, point is that I bought a ticket to go to Barbados, which changed planes in Toronto. I flew for $260, got off the plane in Toronto, did not continue on to Barbados. However, if I would have bought a ticket just to Toronto, it would have been $660. It's cheaper to fly from Toronto to San Francisco than it is from Toronto to Vancouver, and flights to Vegas are even much cheaper. So anyway, I understand that. That's a good point. Now, having said that, though, I've been doing this. I worked in the U.S. My first stuff in the U.S. was 96. I experienced when it was $1.56 per dollar U.S., but I also experienced when the dollar went to par. And I also experienced it when our dollar was actually worth more. But yeah, they've got 10 times more population, so things can be cheaper as well. Other questions? Thank you for adding that. I appreciate it. Now, I'll tell you one thing I would like to show you. One more thing. I mean, I could continue on all night, but I just want to see if I've got the service advisor composite that you and I put together, Kevin. You know what? Instead of doing it that way, let me just show you something even quicker. Oh boy. You're just seeing a black screen, correct?
Gray screen. It just says Kelly is waiting to.
Okay. It's because I can show you this one other way faster. That expression is more than one way to skin a cat, right? Kevin and I worked on the composite. In the interim, if you've got any questions, please feel free to ask those. When Kevin and I worked on the service advisor composite, we certainly knew going into it that we did not want most service advisors. Now, I know some people who are service advisor and they're also the bookkeeper, so that changes things. But we don't want to have the advisor see how much we pay ourselves. We don't want the advisor usually to see how much we pay managers or how much other staff make. We don't want them to see how much the technicians make individually, etc. We certainly would probably not want them to see our bottom line. So what we did is we took the composite. Am I tiling, Kevin?
Nope, it's all really good.
Interesting. Okay, so what we did with the service advisor composite, we certainly wanted them to see how many new customers in the month. We wanted them to see all the sales, the cost of goods sold. And I mentioned we brought it down to line 60, but it was actually line 64. So the advisors only see up to line 64. So they don't see anything below that. So when I mean the service advisor gets a composite, they're getting all of this up to line 64. So now, instead of just the owner of the shop, by the way, something I just thought about here, Kevin, is I've been doing this a long time, but we've never had a service advisor composite, nor have we had a service advisors meeting. And I know what happens is the advisor actually usually doesn't want you to go to that meeting, because you're going to go to that meeting and you're going to come back and want to change everything, and I'd rather that you don't change anything. But now when the advisor is part of the group and we talk about things, now your advisor is going to say, hey boss, here's what I'd like to do. Here's what I'd like to change. I'd like to start using that matrix. And they hold you accountable too, because they learn about the composite or the matrix and they say, well, how come you're not using the matrix? And they go, well, you can't do that here. By the way, one thing I'd like to add, as a trainer, again, all across Canada, all 50 states, I've trained tens of thousands of people, and I find it funny to hear this, and it comes up almost every session. But it's different here, but it's different here. But this is Ottawa. Some people say, well, we're French here. What difference does that make? People pay less because you speak French. It's different in Vancouver. It's different here. I was training in Nanaimo, British Columbia on the island, and this one guy in the class said, have you ever been to Nanaimo before? I said, actually, yes, I have many times. He said, well, then you know it's different here. I said, well, what's different about Nanaimo? He said, well, we have price-conscious people here. I said, oh, that's where they went. We were wondering because everybody else said, oh, the price-conscious people just up and picked up. Obviously, they moved to Nanaimo. Every person on this call could say, yes, we've got some price-conscious people. According to statistics, about 12% of your database are complete total cheapskates. Problem is, we try to run our business sometimes to satisfy the 12%ers. But most people don't deal with you because of your pricing. Most people deal with you because they know you, they like you, and they trust you, and it's really that simple. And the people like the guy who sent the email that said, I've already ordered the parts and this should take you 3 hours, how much are you going to charge, what's your labor rate? We don't need, that's a 12%er. You can't satisfy 12%ers. If your labor rate's 60, they think that's too much because they only make $24 an hour. You could sell your parts and not make any gross profit. You could sell your parts for exactly what you paid for them, and you'll still have some 12%ers that think that's still too expensive and I can buy used ones for cheaper. You can't satisfy everybody, and that's one of the problems in small business. We want everybody to be happy. And then you need to realize we can't make everybody happy. It's not going to happen. Do what you do it well. And the people that love you will continue to do business with you and love you. One of my favorite things is to teach people sometimes that you have to fire customers. And sometimes one of the best things you can do is just fire somebody and say, you know what, there's a lot of other shops out there. I'm sure that you may be happier someplace else, or maybe they're better to meet your needs. But it is not fair for your employees when a customer comes in and abuses them and swears. In the parts business, Kevin, I've heard about people who have had drivers that are rude to their customers and all sorts of things. That is completely not acceptable. So sometimes we just need to fire some customers who are completely rude and obnoxious. Anyway, so yeah, the service advisor composite is just the top portion of that. Okay, let's see. Somebody else has a question here. Kevin, are you able to see these questions?
No, Kelly, they're just for you.
Do I have the power? Okay, so Brent has a question. It says, I understand that, sorry, it's hard for me to read this because it's small, and I need to move my mic. I understand the loss of profits by shopping around for best pricing, but, I love the word but, it is unavoidable sometimes due to a lack of stock. You're correct. Having said that, if you are using the price matrix and have to buy from a supplier that costs you more and bumps the client's price above the dealer list, what is your recommendation? Take a gross profit loss. Okay, so one thing I'd like to show you, and there's not a totally short answer to that, but I love the question. Let me show you something. We didn't cover this in all the detail because we can. I mean, I'm sending you a webinar where I talk about just this subject, okay? You'll notice here when it says dealer parts, it says use the matrix. There's no matrix below that. Now, somebody misunderstood and thought engine rebuild was for dealer parts, transmission was for dealer parts. And I can see that that heading makes it look like that, so maybe we should change the color on that. Can you make a note of that, please, Kevin? So this is not a headline that relates to this. There's some exceptions. You're certainly not going to get massive gross profit on an engine rebuild. Tires, you're not going to use the matrix for tires. You'd price yourself out of the market. We're looking for 30% gross profit in the tires. And some of the other exceptions. But the matrix for dealer parts, we suggest use the matrix. Now, I'd like to talk about dealer list. Dealer list, and by the way, not just dealer list, but any parts vendor's list. Kevin, you there?
Yes, Kelly. Oh, yes. Of course I'm here.
You answer the question because you have a parts background. And I mean, it's not that I can't answer the question. I would love to hear your response as a part vendor who worked with list.
Yep. So the dealer list, I heard the question, and Kelly's going to send you the seminar or the webinar that he's including on how to be able to compete with that and sell it. The part that you're buying, you or I as service dealers, we call the dealer and we get a air filter, we get a axle shaft, whatever the steering component might be. The price that the dealer is quoting us is a takeout price. It doesn't include any of the services. If you or I turned around and said, so that ECM or that module, you need to flash and I'm going to bring it in, I'm going to buy it and walk in, and the service department would not buy into that. The service department runs a profit center above and beyond what the parts department sells for. So the list price that you believe to be the perceived list price is a takeout price from the dealer. So when you're selling whatever the component may be, the nice part, I was all excited to watch Kelly because that green bar that it was their dealer parts, I took the little note. But the idea, the fact is, isn't it all the more reason you should charge more? If you have to buy a dealer part, you can't get it from an aftermarket. It's not going to have an extended warranty. It's not going to provide a nationwide bumper to bumper anywhere they're going to go if you're part of a banner. The dealer part is cash and carry. Customer buys that, they walk out the door, there's no warranty at all on it in most cases. The margins that are going to come off of that, also, if you go to the service department, are a lot higher than what they're going to be able to buy it from the parts department. So we're competing with a dealer that quotes one price out the door, cash and carry, but if you bring it into the service department, that same part is going to be 30 and 40 points higher than what you or I would buy it for if we were to call. So a lot of it is they've held on to us and just kind of held it over our head, and we're taking list less 10 or list less 15 because that's the way we buy it, and we think that we need to be competitive with the dealer. But I assure you, if you brought your vehicle in and said, I'm here for ball joints on my 2012 Suburban, I'd like to have a quote or I'd like to have that work done. It's not under warranty. The quote that you're going to get, and I'm sure you've seen it because people come to you and they're like, my God, the dealer wants this to do this service work. And you look at it and you go like, oh my God, I cannot believe that. Well, let me call for an aftermarket part. We don't compare apples to apples. We're not actually challenging the dealer on what they're doing, where they're running the parts department at a profit center. They turn around and they run their service department as another. So we're competing with the cash and carry price rather than the fully installed with very limited warranty compared to what we offer as service dealers. We give 2 years, 24,000. We give 3-year, 36,000 mile warranty on all the components that we install and send out with a nationwide warranty. So, Kelly, I don't know if I guess
I'm going to recommend, if your warranty is 12 and 12, whether it's 12,000 miles, 12,000 kilometers, 12 months, doesn't matter. I want to encourage you to change it tomorrow to be 24/24. And now that may sound scary. I wouldn't steer you in the wrong direction. We had a fellow, and you saw him on the call, Kevin. I love when somebody can verify what I'm saying. We had a fellow, he was on the call. He was in our management group, still is in the management group in Seattle. Great guy, neat guy, got to know him extremely well. And he came to a session and his warranty was 12 months, 12,000 miles. And we suggested 24/24. And he said, I can't do that. Now, if a part's going to fail, it's usually going to fail pretty quickly. Okay. And so anyway, he couldn't do 12/12. And I'm not exaggerating. He was in our group. We were doing an on-site at his shop. And in came FedEx dropping off a very strange shaped triangle box. And he said, oh, it's here, my banner. And it was a banner that said, home of the 18-month, 18,000 mile warranty. And he was so proud that he was at 18 and 18. A couple of meetings later, he said, I ordered a new banner. I said, what's it say? He said, 24/24. Now, that was the last time I'd seen him. And Kevin, you were on the call. He was on. He said, now I'm 36/36. he didn't bite-size it for anybody other than himself. He couldn't function with that. I'm going to recommend that you have the best warranty in the area. Why? Because we should stand behind our parts. And a lot of dealerships, and I don't exaggerate, some of it's 6 months, 6,000 miles or kilometers, maybe 12 and 12. I personally haven't seen, I haven't seen anything over 12. There might be, I'm not saying none of them do. And by the way, not all dealerships have more expensive parts in their service department than the parts department, but most do. So in other words, if you find the price in the parts department, it's more in the service department. Why? Because technically, as you mentioned, Kevin, there are separate income streams. There are actually two businesses operating within one. Actually, there's service, parts, sales as well. But technically what's happening is internally, the parts department is selling that part to the service department. So there's an administrative fee because the part has to go from parts with a person to get it to the service. Plus they don't get along. So there's usually a frustration fee between the two. And so not all dealerships do, but most dealerships do have a higher price in the service department than in the parts department. And you would think a lot of people would want to go buy the parts in the parts department and bring them to service. Hardly ever does that happen. I know shops that are a parts store and a repair shop, and they say rarely does a person compare the price in the parts department to the service department. But what happens when people ask the question? It's cheaper at the dealership, or it's cheaper at the parts store, or it's cheaper at this other shop. I'm going to suggest you say, and I've had some people say, well, you don't bring your eggs into a restaurant and ask them to cook it now, do you? That's true, you don't, but I think that's rude to say to somebody. It's funny, but I don't think it's a nice thing to say. Instead of saying that, I think we need to sell what we're doing and say, that sounds good. Can I ask you some questions? And then pause. It's better to ask questions than to say something. It's when in a jury you see, in a court scene, I should say, where they're what they call controlling the witness and they're asking questions. They're not allowed to ask questions, those witnesses. They only answer questions. So it's better to ask questions. So you say, can I ask you some questions? Okay. Do you know what the warranty on that part is? Pause. They may know, and you don't want to cut them off in case they do. Most don't. So you say, do you know what the warranty on that part is? Pause. They're waiting for you to talk. Ours is 24 months, 24,000 miles, or 24,000 kilometers, or 36 and 36. They call the dealership back, or the parts store back, or the other shop back and say, what's your warranty? And they say 6 months, 6,000, or 12 months, 12,000. Think like a customer. The customer just heard that your warranty is 24/24, which leads more people to believe that it's a higher quality part because it lasts longer. We did not say it was going to last longer. What we said was we're going to take care of you. If you had a part that failed and a customer came in and your warranty stated right there 12 and 12, Kevin, you have a part repair shop, and I come in with my invoice. They say, Kevin, I was here 13 months ago and this part failed. Are you going to take care of me?
No, I'm just kidding.
Read it and weep, you moron. It's 12 months. This is
Yeah, right.
You say, you know what? We're going to take care of you. It's called goodwill. Will we take care of them at 13 months, 14 months, 15 months? Now, they say, well, 15, yeah, 16 months, that's a bit of a stretch. What if they come in and cry? Oh, that's hard. The point is we're going to take care of people typically anyway. So if we're going to take care of them anyway, let's tell them anyway. An example of what we're talking about, I had a fellow that I was teaching at a session in Las Vegas years ago, and I was teaching on marketing, and this guy said, Kelly, I took your class 4 years ago, and you encouraged us to do 24 months, 24,000 miles. He said, I did that. He said, you actually said 36, 36, but at least do 24, 24. He said, now we're 36, 36. But he said, I stepped through it. I went to 24, 24. And when I realized that work, I went to 36, 36. Some people actually offer unlimited, which is another story. But he said, here's what happened. He said, I've tracked it. In the last 4 years since we changed our warranty, we've had a total of $1,200 in cost in parts that we've replaced. He said, I looked at them on an individual basis and I know that we would have taken care of them anyway. He said, however, I increased my gross profit on parts that day till now 8%. He said, if you take 8% gross profit of parts over 4 years and subtract $1,200, you see how profitable it is to do a 36 month warranty and increase the part. Now, my question here, Kevin, is not just the dealership, but how did you, when you were working at the parts supplier, the jobber, how did you guys come up with list? Where did that number come from?
It was completely fictitious. It worked from it went from what used to be list, and then it was cost plus, and then an extra 12%. And I mean, in some case, it was literally a fictitious number that was created. But you know what's funny, Kelly, is as you were just talking about that, something I'll include. I worked for the absolute largest distributor in North America. They went from a $4.9 billion company to a $9.9 billion company overnight. And they guarantee low prices. They guarantee rock bottom prices. No matter what the price was, if a dealer was to come to a store and say, I can buy that down the street from XYZ parts store, they would match or beat it by 10%. Do you know why they would do that? Because it was less than 0.4 of their total annual sales. But when you're a $9.9 billion company, it's pittance, right? I mean, you're not even talking about, when you can sell something at a loss like that, that's exactly what we're talking about here, is when you can put a guarantee and you could increase the revenue stream knowing that you're going to differentiate yourself from anybody else and say, but it's only 0.4 or 0.4% of my total sales. I'd do that all day, right? Put a guarantee on it, match it, slap a sticker on it, put a promotion in the window if you need to. But when you're managing by the percentages, it's a small percentage of the few that are going to come back. And as we all know, because we're all gem car people, we have a way to track that. We create a department. It's called warranty. You track it, you print your report, and you can see it every month, or every week, every quarter as you move forward. So,
Okay,
yeah, it's a great tool.
Kevin, again, I've not asked you this question before, so I don't know what the answer is, but I have a good idea. How often would a parts price increase your cost to a customer in an average year? Did parts prices increase in a year?
Oh, absolutely.
So then you would take the time to change the list every time, right?
Oh, it was just a rolling percentage. It was just automatically. Whatever the price increase was, we would get a report every day that would show our inventory shrinkage so that we would understand your value of your core bank went from 156,000, it's now worth 230,000. So that would affect the P&L in the store. The store manager would see that. But proportionally, the list would be adjusted the same way. So every time there was an increase, the list was just automatic. So if it was 40 or 50 points, whatever the electronic signature was that went with that, that oil filter went from $495 to $513. The list price went proportionally the same amount, automatically.
Okay, now see, again, I didn't know what your answer is going to be, but I have worked with some other part vendors who would say, oh, we haven't touched list in years. That list price you're talking about, that was the same list as it was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 10 years ago. And then the other thing that completely mortified me, sorry, the stuff part vendors do, is they say it's just fictitious. We just come up with a number. What do you think the list would be? And they would just literally have a meeting and just come up with some of the stuff out of their heads. The worst that I heard, I've never mentioned this publicly ever, but I won't mention the name of the part vendor. But if they had, this is big vendor, if they had a part that they sold and there was, this, years ago, I remember Raybestos brakes. People were all upset about Raybestos and their sales were going down because people didn't want to buy them because they heard about these bad things. And I'm not saying anything bad about Raybestos. It's just one of the things that comes to mind. And so they would have a part that would have a bad reputation. They would take the part, put it in a different box, and and I'm not kidding, in a boardroom, they would say, okay, what do you want to call this part? And they would change the name of the part, add it to the box. It was the exact same part you bought 2 years ago that you would never buy again. It's the same part in a new box with a new name and a new color on the box. And one thing they realized is people didn't want anything in a white box. They said, how about a gray box? Oh, yeah, gray box, we'd buy that. So they changed their box colors to not be white. Sorry, I just think that's hysterical. Anyway, my point is that back to your question, there's a few things. One is you don't need to tell the customer where you bought the part from. If you put the full part number on there, that allows them to shop. Kevin, can you address what GemCar does with that? And by the way, question I have for you, sir, is this something that automatically happens, or do I as a GemCar user have to tell this to happen?
depending on the download and the coach that you're working with or the trainer that you had. So to answer Kelly's question, in GemCard you can mask you could display only the last 4 digits of the part number. So on invoices, on quotations, on any documents that you're going to release from your GemCard, the only thing that will display is the last 4 digits of the part number, if that's in the configuration that you care to have. It's option 18 in your general configuration. So if you go to configuration, general information, you check the box for number 18, every quote that you put together, only the last 4 digits of the part number will ever display on the customer's invoice. So that way they can't go down the street and shop, a Gates Bell KO 60560. They're only going to see 0560 as the part number. So same with the dealer part. If you put a dealer part number on there and it's a Motorcraft number, the person that is receiving the invoice from you is not only going to see the last 4 digits of the part number, not the whole 11 digits that are going to be there. So it's masked, and by default, it is not activated depending on who your trainer was that you're working with. For myself, I never activate it unless I ask, is this something you want to hide? But it's option 18 under your general configuration.
I was in a class, I heard that, it just happened to be that one of the guys in the class was a GemCard user, and he said, well, I like the fact that it only shows the last 4 numbers. I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, our software, you can tell it to only show the last 4 numbers. So you should have seen the look on my face, Kevin. You would think somebody just told me some revolutionary thing. Why? Because it was. Because over the years, people say the part number's on there, then the person phones around and says, what's the price for this part? But if it's a 4-digit number, and I phone the part vendor and say, how much is a 4727? They go, I don't know. Well, we don't have a 4727. So we don't have to tell people where we bought the parts from. But anyway, I want to get back to the question and just answer it succinctly. They don't know where we bought the part. We don't need to tell them where we bought the part. I don't believe that we should make less gross profit on a dealer part. And I can tell you in classes, I've had people say you can't use the matrix on dealer parts. And people in the class have said, what do you mean? I've been doing it for years. The reason they can do it is because they think they can. If you think you can't, then you can't, right? We don't need to try to, dealerships don't want you to make money, right? They will make the list price lower, and that's another discussion. It's just the whole list price itself is, they want you to sell the part for less, because if you sell it for less, then they're going to make more because you're going to make it up in volume. It's like a tire manufacturer. Tire manufacturers don't want you to make buku gross profit on tires, because if you sell them for less, you're going to have to make it up in volume. They don't really care. In reality, these major tire companies, in fact, is the less that you make, the more that you're going to have to buy for them and make it up in volume. So back to the question. Again, you don't need to tell them where you bought it. So you can say, and if they say, well, I phoned the dealership like there's only one, can I ask you a question? Do you mind if I ask, did you speak to the parts department or the service department, because it's maybe comparing a takeout price to an installed price. You don't go to a restaurant and order steak and say, you've got to be kidding, it's $22. I was at the grocery store yesterday and it's $5.99 a pound. It could be the same quality. It could have come off the same cow, but you're not going to pay the same price for a takeout steak in a grocery store that's raw than you're going to pay for in a restaurant. And then, of course, the whole warranty thing. So you simply say, can I ask you a question about warranty? Sure. Do you know what the warranty is? Pause. Ours is 24 months, 24,000 miles. And now they're understanding that they are comparing apples with apples, but didn't realize that. And sometimes it's not the same quality of part either. I bought a laptop last year. It was $1,800. And my landlord said, you've got to be kidding. He said, don't you know you can go to the to the pharmacy, Shoppers Drug Mart, and buy them for $300? And I thought, I don't even want to answer the question. It's so dumb. Like, you can't compare a $300 laptop to an $1,800 laptop and say one's more expensive. In fact, sometimes the cheapest thing you buy is the most expensive thing. I was traveling one time. I went into some store they have in the U.S. Can't remember what it was, some discount place, and the airlines had lost my luggage, and I went in there and I thought, holy crap, look at the price. These shoes are amazing. And I bought this watch, and I thought, wow, it's really cheap. I can't remember the name of the store. I don't know, TJ Maxx, there you go. And a couple of days later, I'm looking at my watch, and it's almost got some like sand or some kind of, I don't even know what it was, looked like lint or something.
And within a week or two, I could hardly make out the watch because some kind of particles were releasing inside the watch. And I thought, this is the most expensive watch I've ever bought. And then the shoes were starting to wear within weeks. And the belt, I used it twice and it was falling apart. And I thought, this is the most expensive stuff I've ever bought. To buy something cheap that lasts for a week is pretty expensive. I bought some luggage. My wife was mortified. She said, you spent $600 on this luggage? I still have it. It's been on over 2,000 flights. I had a part vendor, Kevin, who sent me, because I was going to be going to their trade show, sent me the biggest piece of crap luggage. I couldn't believe it. My son even opened it up. He said, Dad, look at how crappy this is. And I looked at it and thought, oh my God, it broke, and I don't exaggerate, it broke on the first trip. So something that's cheap can actually be expensive. The way I say it with software, for example, good software ain't cheap, cheap software ain't good. Anyway, you know what? It's really about educating our customers. And anything that else needs to be added to that, Kevin? For the person who asked the question, is that enough information? Again, I'm going to be sending you that information anyway. Other questions? By the way, it was one of the vendors in Ontario when we talked about list. He said some of those list prices are the same that they were 10 years ago. That's what he said. And he would be in the know because he was a big shot. I just can't resist this. I went on last night when we were having our meeting and I went to find cheap repair. I tried to download this for some reason. It didn't work. But look at this sign here. New Era Garage, auto repairing. When was it New Era? I see a sign like that. I think there's a person not making money. Like New Era in 1922 maybe. But my point about that is if you are really trying to do things on the cheap, then you can't afford paint, you can't afford a sign, you can't afford stuff. I bet you that guy's parts gross profit completely sucks. State of the art, they say. Okay, with that, again, you've been extremely patient. Thank you very much, Kevin, for your time. It's much later for you. It's only 9:20 for me, 11:20 for you. Again, there's a lot of information we could continue on, but you're welcome, Frank. Thank you very much. Yeah, got a day to start tomorrow. Anyway, again, I'm sending you the recorded version. I've recorded it right to the very end, including all the questions. You could fast forward to any of the sections that you wanted more information on. So tomorrow you can expect to get the recording, the PowerPoint presentation, all of the spreadsheets I said I would send, the articles that I said I would send, and the parts kits. With that, thank you very much, everybody. Again, Kevin, thank you, sir. Your commitment's phenomenal. Love your software. Again, I'm a person who's experienced pretty much every shop management software out there, and it's the best. It just is. It's the only one I endorse because I see what it does. And any questions for Kevin K. King? And he's Kevin the King. K. King at v2v.ca. Is that right? CA?
Yep, that's great.
And you're Canadian, I mean American, so should be .com.
Yeah, or you can do it it's also at gem-car.com, but sometimes it gets confusing with the gem-car.com. So either way.
Kelly at kellythecoach.com for me. You're going to get the emails from me anyway. So with that, everybody, thank you very much. Got questions, please let me know. This is the longest webinar I've ever done and the most amount of people that stayed on. So thank you for your commitment. Go back, and you know what? It's about implementation, not just learning about stuff, but go back and keep on. Thank you, everybody.